Dave Merman. I'm from Glenville, Nebraska, and represent the 38th District. I serve as chair of this committee. We have almost a committee of full strength today. I think there's going to be one hopefully on the telephone, but I'll have them introduce themselves, starting with Senator Sanders.
Good afternoon, Rita Sanders, representing District 45, which is the Bellevue Offutt community.
Good afternoon, I'm Luann Lenahan. I represent District 39, which is Elkhorn and Douglas County.
Oh, hey, I'm Lynn Walls, and I represent Legislative District 15, which is all of Dodge County and Valley.
Justin Wayne, District 13, which is North Omaha and Northeast Douglas County.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Danielle Conrad. I represent North Lincoln's Fightin' 46th Legislative District.
And Senator Albright will be joining us via phone on today's hearing. To my right is Committee Research Analyst Jack Spray, and to my far right is Committee Clerk Shelley Schwartz. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, this will be a briefing for the Education Committee and public in general to receive information about concerns regarding how Omaha Public Schools has handled the shortage of special education teachers and other issues related to this problem, and how we might resolve the issues or manage the situation in the future. To help facilitate these proceedings and maintain an accurate record, we ask with your assistance with the following. Please mute cell phones and electronic devices. The committee members may be using their cell phones for researching information pertaining to this hearing. They also might come and go during the hearing if they have other duties requiring their attention. If you intend to testify, please pick up a green sign-in sheet that is on the table at the back of the room. Please fill out the green sign-in sheet before you testify. Please print and complete the form in its entirety. When it is your turn to testify, give the sign-in sheet to my legislative aide or to the committee clerk. This will help us make a more accurate public record. If you are not testifying and you wish to record your attendance in the hearing, you may sign in the white attendance sheet located on the table at the back of the room. If you have handouts, please make sure you have 12 copies and give them to my legislative aide, Chris Nelson, when you come up to testify. And that's Chris just coming in here. And he will distribute them to the committee members. Please move to the reserved chairs when you are ready to testify. These chairs are in the first row. Invited testifiers will present first with questions from the committee following their statements. We will then be using the light system today after invited testimony. The public will be allowed, I'm trying and hold everything to 5 minutes to speak. When you see the yellow light come on, that means you have 1 minute remaining. No displays of support or opposition to a bill, vocal or otherwise, from the audience are allowed at a public hearing. So first, I will invite the first testifier from the parents that are affected by the Omaha Public Schools parents, and that's Kelsey Escobar. You can do it afterward, no problem.
Want to sit here?
Yes.
Okay. Never done this before. You're doing great.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so he has my copy that I typed up. Kind of did this in a rush, but I'm slightly going to go over what happened with my son regarding Omaha Public School transportation, OPS Tech Building. Around the time of,
can you state and spell your name?
Yes,
Sorry.
Kelsey Escobar, KELSEYESCOBAR.
And if you have any trouble on your phone, I do have a copy.
Can I get a copy? Yeah, because he's got my copy. Okay.
Actually,
Yeah,
Chris,
I'll do
yeah.
it.
Thank you. Okay. You guys ready?
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Okay, so around the time of August, a week before school started, I received a phone call and an email from Omaha Public Schools regarding the issue with special education teachers quitting. I was told that if I wanted to continue to receive services for Grayson, which is my son, through his IEP, that we would have to transfer him schools due to special ed teacher shortage at Central Park. I had 12 schools to choose from at the time, and some of them provided door-to-door drop-off. I went to one of the schools to look at it and see how it was, and it was Ponca Elementary. I advised to OPS that we would like to switch Grayson and Jackson, my other son, who was also on an IEP, but still falls under special education care, to go to Ponca Elementary. I was told they both could go there, but then found out that they don't have pre-K, which is what Jackson is in. And so I would have two kids in two different schools. I had to reach out Thursday or Friday, a couple days before school started, to see what bus route Grayson would be on to and from school, since the bus app was not working and it's like Caldwell's on the bus. The lady informed me of the pickup because I had to call OPS Transportation to get the time and the date of when they would start the pickup for my son. And so after I did that, I just lost my thought. Hold on, you guys. The lady informed me of the pickup and drop-off time. Come August 16th, which was the first day of school, which was a Wednesday, Grayson started his first week at Ponca. On his first day of school, Grayson was picked up from school and to school. He was supposed to be picked up and brought back. Later that day, between 4:30 and 5 p.m., I received a phone call from Grayson's principal that Grayson had not been picked up yet from his bus driver, and he would probably be late to get him. I never received a call from OPS Transportation regarding that my son would be late or not getting picked up at all. So I told the school I would go and pick up my son because obviously I didn't want him to be left alone. And so after that, the next following day, Grayson was picked up from school. But the bus never goes to pick up after school. The second day, I didn't get a call from OPS Transportation as well. So the following day, I was getting upset. This happened 2 days in a row with no communication at all from OPS Public School Transportation. The following day, Grayson was picked up from school and then headed down to the TAC building after he went to school. I got there and I asked him something's not right. I wanted to know why my son is being neglected from getting picked up from school, knowing that we were promised door-to-door drop-off in order to continue receiving services for my son's IEP. The special education at TAC building told me that she would get to the bottom of this and call me back at the end of the day. Grayson was never picked up that day again. I never received a call back from Garrett as well, and didn't get a call back again from OPS Transportation. However, I did that evening get a letter in the mail stating the pickup and drop-off time for Grayson, which is an example on the page if you flip it. The next day, I went down to the TAC building with my sister-in-law after the news came to my house. So KTV7 did come to my house regarding this issues that was going on with my son. After she left me and my dad and my sister-in-law, we ended up going down to the TAC building. My son is in special education. And for this to happen is very shocking, inappropriate, disappointing in our school system. After the news left me, my dad, and my sister-in-law, we went down to the TAC building again, and we wanted to get our answers, and also advised her on the letter that I got in the mail the night before. She was even shocked and sent out an email regarding this issue. I was then told that they don't know when Grayson would get picked up from school. So again, in 2 weeks, I would have to transfer my son to another school because we did not have promised door-to-door drop-off with my son. So, and regarding to that, they were looking into other schools to get him into. I was then told that they don't know when Grayson would get picked up, so we would have to do that. I feel like that's a way of OPS bullying. I stood my grounds and I told them I'm keeping my son at Ponca and that I will pick up until they find a bus driver to get him to and from school. To keep their promises that they told me in the beginning. The following week, I was told about Grayson was not going to be getting picked up, dropped off in 2 different buses. Since then, Grayson has been picked up and dropped off at home after neglecting him at school the first week with no communication to the school and was trying to bully us to going to another OPS. OPS needs to be held accountable in any type of leadership reform for neglecting my son and putting the fear in my son because my son was questioning why he was being left at school. My son is in special education classes. My son has special needs. He was fearing because he kept getting left and he was wondering why the bus wouldn't ever come and get my son. So I'm doing this in regards to my son, and I'm also doing this in regards to other students that have probably went through the same situation or worse. I also provided a documentation from the Omaha Public Schools. I also have more documentation. I just didn't print that, but I do have it. From the Omaha Public School that they emailed also regarding the services with Grayson, that with the shortage of special education students.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll open it up for questions from the committee, and I'm going to say we'll have two questions from each senator, and then we'll go around, and if there are no further questions from other senators, then we'll have two again from the senators.
Okay.
So does anybody have a question right now? Yes, Senator Conrad.
Thanks, Senator Merman. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you taking time to come down to Lincoln and share your story. And I know it's not easy to do that and to talk about painful things that are happening in your family's life right now. But it just wasn't clear to me from your testimony. And I was hoping that you could maybe help paint the picture for us a little bit more, since we have the benefit of your time and your lived experience.
Okay.
But how old is your son?
He's 8.
He's 8.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have a 6-year-old and an 11-year-old, so he's right in between. But I know how anxious my kids get when they're just maybe even a minute or two in between when they're supposed to be dropped off or supposed to be picked up. So I'm guessing that probably caused him a lot of anxiety and stress and sadness. Could you just kind of help the committee understand, when the bus doesn't show up like it's promised to show up, like kind of how does that impact your family in terms of what you had planned for the day for taking care of other things or other transportation issues, just to maybe help kind of tease that out a little bit more?
So I actually ended up having to take time off of work because of this situation. Because obviously I can't leave my son at school and get neglected. Nobody else, I don't really have people to depend on that.
Mm-hmm.
People all have lives. So I actually took time off of work because of this. And my son would ask me every day when he knew that I was picking him up. He was like, "Mom, how come the school bus is not here to pick me up? How come I have to keep waiting in the cafeteria to wait for the bus, knowing the bus is not going to come get me?" I know my son, and I know how he reacts, and with his anxiety and so forth, my son was, scared. He didn't know any better. He didn't know if his mom was going to come or if the bus was going to come. He didn't know. But obviously I'm his mother, so I was going to be there to go and pick up my son from school, even though I was promised door-to-door drop-off. But unfortunately, I didn't have that. I didn't have that communication that was going to tell me, "Oh, hey, we're not going to be able to pick up your son today." They failed to do that. They were just like, "Oh, she'll just figure it out."
Thank you so much, and I'll use my second one now as
Sure.
well.
Conrad.
That would have been helpful in preparation, but we'll work it out. Kelsey, thank you so much. And is it okay if I call you Kelsey?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
The other thing that I'm really worried about, in addition to the lack of services for families, is the lack of communication.
Right.
And you hit the nail right on the head in your testimony. But, looking through the documents that you provided to the committee, you're getting information about major changes to your school plan right before school started, right after school started.
They had a whole year to figure it out, and they still sent us bus routes information, knowing that they weren't going to have a bus driver there, but they just wanted to send it out to parents just to make it look like, okay, well, your kids are going to get on this bus and we're going to get your kids to the school. But they didn't even know that. They didn't know. They weren't even for sure, but they still sent out that letter to me.
Yeah, and I'm just to follow up on that. Sorry, I don't want to abuse the two questions. I'm just trying to understand the communication timeline, if the chair would indulge me.
Sure.
Okay. So when did you guys start school at OPS?
August 16th, which is a
16th.
Wednesday, and I got that letter Friday.
And I was going to say, I see that it's dated like the 15th and you started the 16th. So that's really zero time
Right.
to make plans as a family for these major changes and disruption to your child's educational and educational opportunities and services that they have available. And so that was the other question I had for you, is that if you could help the committee understand, you received this notice at the last minute and you're being asked then to either waive services or take transportation to another place way farther away from your home. Like, can you help us just kind of understand what was going through your mind during that time? Were you able to get more information from OPS?
So,
or did
no,
you feel...
I didn't get any more information from the transportation, but I did get it from the TAC building. But for my worries was, okay, well, I have another son who's going to a whole complete different school. So
Right.
I have to have this one to school by 8:45. My
Right.
son's getting picked up. He doesn't usually get picked up until around 8:45, which was another concerning thing because the bus was late. So I'm over here thinking, okay, well, how am I going to get one kid to school on
Yeah.
time when I got to get this other one to
Yeah.
school on the bus by this time? But then my other son, he's going to be late going to school. So it was very stressful for me. It was something I didn't ever think I would have to go through, is because obviously it's the school system. They know what they're doing. Our kids are in their hands pretty much. And so for me, it was very, like, I guess, traumatizing. And, it was just, it was inappropriate. And I feel like this is just like a slap on their wrist. Like they could, I want this from today. I want this to be handled with, and to where they know not to do this again, because obviously I'm their voice and I'm here to speak for it. So.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Yep.
That's really helpful. I
Yep.
really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. We'll give opportunity for other senators to ask questions if anyone has any. I guess I've got a follow-up question to
Okay.
kind of Senator Conrad's line of questioning. So you had a lot of issues in the first couple of weeks with busing especially. And of course, the late notice was a huge problem also. Are you satisfied with the special ed services that Grayson is getting now?
I am, and the school that he goes to, Ponca Elementary, is a fantastic, wonderful school. It's a smaller school, which is better for students which I believe has special needs. It's less distractions. They get more learning done. They get that more one-on-one time. So yes,
Oh, great.
absolutely.
Great. And as far as the busing issue goes, is that
I mean,
working
it's
well
working,
now?
but who's to say something could happen down the line? Do I trust the school's transportation? I really don't.
Can you count on the buses to
pick him up? Yes.
Morning and
He's
evening.
amazing. His morning driver is amazing. He's amazing. I could definitely count on him. But afternoon wise, who's to say? I don't, I always have my phone next to me just in case the school tells me, hey, the bus did not come today. So.
Great. Any other questions, senators?
I just have a-
Senator Conrad.
Thank you so much. When you received the notice that there wasn't going to be special ed services available at your home school or your neighborhood school, and it gave you the option to either waive services or take transportation, did they ever explain to you the ramifications if you decided to waive services in terms of what that would mean for your child's future ability to access services or anything to that nature? Did they kind of help to lay out kind of what those choices meant as you were asked to make a split-second decision?
No, they honestly only just told me that I wouldn't be able to receive special education services for my son if I was to keep him at Central Park.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
Any other questions?
So did you feel like they were asking you to remove your child's IEP? Or-
Pretty much, because obviously, I feel like they were like, either he could get the IEP or he's not going to get the IEP. So it's your pick. You either transfer him schools and get him into another IEP, or you keep him here and he won't have an IEP.
Thank you.
I have a question. The location of the schools and as far as picking up times and so forth, is that okay now? or
Where
did you
Ponca
get better
Elementary
service?
is, I would say from my house, it's about a 15-minute drive. Grayson usually gets home by between 4:35, 4:45 from the bus now. So, but the difference really wasn't an issue. It was a great school, so it was worth the distance to me because he was going to get that one-on-one special education time that he needed to help him succeed and grow. So
Sure. And the services up until this year, were you satisfied with them?
I was satisfied, but I was also, what I do remember is that with transportation and kids with special education, you're supposed to like renew your IEP, but that didn't even happen as well. That wasn't done, which is what's supposed to be done before you put them in a different school and start, which was supposed to be happening. That wasn't even done.
Yes, thank you. Senator Lanahan.
So have they? Thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much. Have they talked to you at all about what happens next year?
No, which was my concern is, does Grayson have to go back to Central Park? Just because if they get special education teachers again, does he have to go back there? Or can my son transfer to Ponca with his oldest brother? Because also my middle child is also on an IEP. He's got speech therapy. So he is categorized under the IEP. And so I was thinking, okay, well, you guys could just go here until you guys go to middle school. It's a great school. It's very educational, you know? But my worries is they're going to tell me next year they got to, he's got to go back to Central because they didn't tell me anything.
So it was in the paper this morning that they're going to start doing speech therapy online?
I'm not aware of that. My son, Jackson, goes to Central Park and he sees the speech therapist there.
Speech therapist is a special ed teacher.
Right. So for the services that Grayson is actually needing, though, they don't have that at Central Park.
But they do have speech therapy.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah,
for being
you're
here.
welcome.
Any other questions? Senator Wayne.
Just for those who don't know, Central Park is in the heart of Senator McKinney's district, right off of a couple blocks north of Ames. Ponca is the farthest north school in my district, and there's literally only one road in and one road out. And it's so far north that when I was on the board, we were trying to figure out how to fix the street over. And I got into an argument because it's actually outside of the city limits, and they were trying to figure out who would pay for the road. So Ponca's inside, but it is the farthest, and I can give the committee a map later, but it is the farthest northern school in my district.
Last one.
Yes, Senator Conrad.
Thank you so much. I keep thinking about how my kids would react to a situation like this. And I know how much stability comes with going to a familiar school with familiar faces. They've developed friendships. They know the layout for where everything is at. And it is, I think, really a testament to you that you're trying to find the bright side of things, and maybe there's better services or a better fit at this other school. So that's really good to know. But I am worried about what that means for social relationships and trust and stability when we have kids moving back and forth between different schools. How's that transition gone outside of kind of the provision of services or the transportation piece?
I mean, so far it's going good.
Okay.
They're
They're resilient, making friends.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
doing good. Yep.
Great.
His teacher's amazing. His special education teacher is amazing. We have this notebook that we communicate every day through.
Oh, good.
And the principal's amazing. He was willing to go out of his way for us with the situation with the transportation. And he kept me up to date and would call me every day. He did more than them. So,
Right.
yeah,
So you're loving your interactions with the frontline folks, the teachers, the school
Yep.
principal, feeling a lot of scar tissue about communications with the central office.
yes.
Any other questions for Kelsey? I have another one. Do you know of any other friends or relatives that have had similar issues to what you've had, or anyone in your area?
So not that I personally know, but so there's this group that I follow on Facebook, and it's about the Omaha Public School. And from what I see, there's a lot of issues with different issues, not just transportation, where kids are getting left sitting in the cold, having to wait for the bus to get there because they're taking, whatever reason. So there's a lot of issues out there that I feel like needs to be fixed. And I think this was just the cherry to it.
Well, I appreciate you coming in. Any other questions for Ms. Escobar? Thank you very much for
Thank you.
testifying.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And now there's a couple other parents. I think Senator Wayne has invited a couple parents to come.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Any other parents directly affected by the OPS special ed program or the busing program? Like to testify? Yes. Come on. Thanks a lot, and you'll have to first state your name, spell it out, please.
Yes, my name is Darrell E. Lechner Jr., and I'm actually from La Vista, but this ties into my district also, which became aware to me just fairly recently. Just to give a little background, because a lot of what you discussed today is very understandable, because I was a school bus driver for OPS for over 13 years. I also was a therapeutic foster parent with Child Saving Institute for a long time also. Both my daughters have disabilities. They have autism and ADHD, and they'd like to speak here later on briefly, and that's to kind of say hi and pass on some wonderful teachers' names that they appreciate, and that's why they're here too. I actually drove for Ponca Elementary years ago, and I did volunteer work in the summertime when we did rehab around the school on our own time. A bunch of the school bus drivers, parents, and other people did that. I actually love that school. I really, really do. That was one of the most, like I said, we got a lot of good teachers there, a lot of great staff. I don't know who the principal is now, but that was years ago when I went there, but I would drive to that school again in a heartbeat. Solutions. I'm all about kind of solutions, because we can sit here and argue and go back and forth, not come up with anything. I drove for originally Harmon, Laidlaw, First Student, and then STA. If that tells you how long I'd seen a variety of different companies take over, switch. I did not drive directly for OPS, the minibuses, but also covered for Millard schools prior to their starts. I did sped routes for them, special education routes, usually that. And I'm quite familiar with IEPs with both of my daughters having disabilities, and they're 16 and 13 now. So it's been a lot of love and lots of fun over the years. You have a lot of good bus drivers throughout this city and our state. I don't discredit any and all their efforts. I was there. I cried with students. I helped students. I know we have a lot of good teachers. There's going to be bumps in any road we go through. Now in the Vista, in our school district that I'm in, we don't have school bus routes unless a parent pays for it directly. We do offer some special ed students rides to those schools. I do understand the difference from this and the cost and the implications of it. But I want to make it clear to any and all parents that, first of all, busing to schools is not your right. It's a privilege. If you have students that are being disobedient, they need to be removed from school buses. I had one student over the years, he'd ridden up 13 times and he was never removed. I had students I had to have physically removed from my school bus with 2 security and a teacher. I've had fights on my bus. If you remember Amber, years ago, who we lost in our school district by a very bad person, I knew the school bus driver directly, was the last person to see her. And thank you again, Senator Wayne. I appreciate it. I've talked to you many times too. But the gist of this is one of the things we could do is I would like to see a solution where we could actually get to the students' names prior to the school year starting, earlier time frame. That would allow this, because as busing companies, we have to go through systems to try to do the routing. That doesn't happen in a few days. Those can take weeks sometimes to set up. Plus you have where you have your drivers then have to select routes based on your seniority. There's a chain that has to happen before we can get these disseminated to the drivers. That's how come I don't blame the drivers, but we need to kind of pull things earlier on in our school districts to where then we can get an idea what drivers we need still. Are we hurting behind? Then we can address it before we have students standing on corners or getting home at night at 8:30 or later. I don't ever see that. Done that, been there. Latest I ever dropped off a student was about 10:15 at night. Mind you, it was the winter time, the weather was terrible, and it was a late school run. This wasn't leaving at school, so the circumstances were understandable. But one of the solutions I think we could really try to make a difference on is getting the students information to your busing outfits earlier on. That would be high priority. If you don't know, make up another slot, but get those to the routing, your transportation departments earlier on. We can disseminate that, get it to our drivers, get those routes picked, and then we can see if there's more problems. We're always going to have a shortage of drivers to some degree because there's a turnover on that. There's some hard routes. I've done some really, really rough routes. In regards to students with IEPs, there's a lot of good teachers in this here, but I'm seeing issues where it's disseminating we need an accountability on what's actually being accomplished by these IEP teams. We need something which will go through and then review what is these teams actually doing or not doing. Because I'm seeing that's where it's falling behind. It's like with the other lady. I loved hearing when she said Punk Elementary School because I knew that so well and knew so many wonderful people there. But there was many other schools. We need to find some way to hold these IEP groups accountable. If it's another agency or something within our school district that we can do. But I kind of like to think of it as we're Nebraskans. We have families, we understand kids. I wasn't a foster parent because I didn't love kids. And like I said, some of it hits home because it's a big deal. And if you ever have any questions for me, I'll be more than willing to answer anything I can with my experience over the years. Sometimes I was originally going to discuss some other things, but after hearing her and the concerns which was going to the board, I was like, my experience, I kind of like to think God puts me in places where he needs me at times. And I guess I was here at this time. But thank you again. And is there anything else?
Well, thank you for testifying and appreciate your perspective as both a parent of special needs and a bus driver also. I don't think you spelled your name out to start with.
Sorry, Darrell, Darrel, middle initial E, Lechner, Lechner, and I'm a junior.
Okay.
And I'm honorary and silly, and I'd actually been on several of the news channels over the years, reaching out to some of the kids that I helped on my school bus routes. I worked with Bryan Middle School. I worked with the principal there with one of the hardest routes, and I set up a little mini program where we try to make a difference in every child's life in that bus. I couldn't buy students things directly, so I bought 40 some, almost 50 some little notebooks so they could journal their lives, because I wanted them to record for every one positive thing in their life that they came across. I wanted them to write it down.
Well, thank you very much for testifying, and especially as a foster parent also, I forgot to mention that. A question I have, you have a lot of experience with special ed kids. Do some of this, and you talked about the issues that can develop from the busing and special ed. Do some of the special ed kids have a paraeducator that rides with them also?
That depends on the school district, first of all, because some different districts are different. When I was in Millard, we did have, and it wasn't a para, we called them ride-alongs. We had extra people who would come along with us for that. When I was in Waterloo, Iowa, actually, we did all of that. That was very challenging, especially when you're driving a full-size bus with multiple wheelchairs. Don't get me wrong, I mean, you do it, it's a labor of love, but it makes it much more difficult to get from stop to stop within a shorter time frame.
Sure.
But yeah, the extra hands are very necessary. Now, the only situation where I would feel you have to have that is if you have students to will unbuckle themselves and become unsecured. Those extra eyes are needed. I cannot stress that enough, because you can have situations that could blow up very quickly. And a driver, if you're driving a vehicle, you can't kill anybody. You got to think of people outside and inside. And
So sometimes you had enough extra hands in the bus
yes.
for certain, maybe school districts and sometimes you didn't.
Oh yeah, it was, like I said, it's different districts are different. Like I drove in Iowa too at one time, covering the route there for a period of time. That was an eye-opening experience. Many of our buses here in Omaha, and that you can have buses that can have 5 to 7 kids on. When I was in Waterloo, Iowa, those buses, every single bus was nearly full. We had 50 plus students on those buses. They were maxed out almost every single time. They weren't standing room only, obviously, but they were full. Managing students is a little different too. At one point, one of the concerns I had was when students with IEPs and disabilities were being put on our regular routes, us as drivers were not being informed. And then we're having situations that got explosive on our bus because we don't know. And there was one other concern I have with this is when you have a driver that does not know students have IEPs, if something could trigger them, you can have very explosive. I had a student blow up and start going hands-on with another student because he didn't understand and perceive things. He had an honest IEP and a disability, and the other students didn't know that. But as a driver, then I could have directed him to an area, kept him in an area where I could monitor him better and keep him safe. And prevention is half the battle, is the way I look at it. If you can prevent it and redirect something, we can actually prevent those things in the first place.
Thank you. I really appreciate your perspective. Any other questions from, yes, Senator Conrad?
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. And this seems like maybe something you can help us understand, since you had so many different experiences driving for different districts and public versus private contractors and things like that. And I know that transportation service providers are always in short supply, and this kind of goes hand in glove with some of the issues that OPS is facing. So I know that we've got challenges in workforce development, to put it mildly, but like you, I think that this committee is committed to being really solution oriented. Can you help us understand what drives, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, what drives folks to stay as a bus driver at OPS or at Millard or go work for a private? Is it a difference in terms of salary or benefits or hours? What's really and of course there might be family considerations as well, but what do you think is really a key solution to recruiting and retaining folks that have experience in providing transportation services?
Now, driving for your private contractors, like with STA currently with OPS, or first student with, say, La Vista or Wallaston for that matter, there are some differences. Your OPS side of your mini buses, your special ed buses, they're paid differently than your contract ones.
Okay.
The way they're paid is there's a portion of it's taken out and then they're paid throughout the year. So they don't have to worry about, okay, we're not going to have a paycheck. We're not going to have, how do we pay bills? It allows those drivers to have a consistent paycheck throughout the year without compromise, which is very good. Now, sometimes they'll pick up extra routes or things that are events that may come up during the summertime. That'll give them a little boost, but it's not anything that's a game changer. So the biggest problem I see with the private contractors is that if you're not driving, you're not getting paid, period. It stops. During the summertime, you're let go. You have to rely on unemployment to get you by. If you don't know how to do that, or there's bumps in the system, people leave so fast. I mean, I did it for years, but even then, there was times when I didn't get unemployment benefits because there was a hiccup, because what we're supposed to have in the law set up to allow us to have that as a benefit to get us through. They're denying us services. And then there's a period where we have a 2-week wait period where we don't get anything at all. You better know how to save up and stretch it, or you don't get anything. That's what I can tell you. That's a big part of it, especially for keeping new drivers.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know any driver that didn't do this because we didn't want kids. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the bottom line.
That's,
I was on Channel 3 years ago too, and was reaching out to some of my past students. One of the other programs I had real quick was where I started working with students in junior high to prepare them for college. I mean, this is the labor of love we do, and there's more than just me. I could announce a bunch of school bus drivers that still
Yeah.
do this today.
that's super helpful. I really appreciate that. I hadn't thought about the interplay with unemployment and kind of how that works in and
Oh my gosh.
on the recruitment and retention. So do you happen to know like generally what they're paying bus drivers in the Omaha area at this point in time?
You're paid for what you're driven. Your routes, your senior drivers, depending on it, I used to be a senior driver. I'm not doing it anymore.
Okay.
But, and I don't currently represent them. I could give you my ideas of experience, and I don't want to put them out there, but you get what you're paid for. Senior drivers will have first bids on your most hourly routes. Your newest drivers, they get whatever's left over. And I guarantee you those are some of the hardest routes and usually the ones with the least hours. You will be lucky to maybe get 30 hours a week at times. Because your late runs will be picked up by senior drivers. Your midday runs, you've got to pray for charters. Your charters are based in seniority too. There's some rotation on it, which we did. We tried to be fair, a lot of it. But yeah, I can tell you right now, that's a big part of retention that is, at least with the private side of it. Now, I did really love the OPS side of it. You have some of the greatest mechanics I've ever seen down there too. My heart goes to you guys. I don't give them shout out and give them love.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah.
Senator Waltz.
Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your care and your compassion. It's very evident, and we appreciate it. And thank you for being solution oriented. Appreciate that as well. I'm trying to kind of understand the whole process or the structure. So does OPS contract with the transportation service, and then the transportation service hires the drivers, and how does that whole thing work?
Now, some of this may have changed to some degree over various times, especially between contractors from like Harmon to Laidlaw to First Student, to now STA. The gist of it is basically they'll contract, from my understanding, they'll contract a certain number of routes or, let me think of this clearly. The school district will send out a certain number of students and addresses to where these need to be picked up. We run them through systems to locate their stops and try to get them within groups within certain time frames so we can pick up the students on time and in order, then get them to the schools. Then from that school and that drop off, that driver will go from either a high school route to an elementary route. They have to have the time to race to that new stop off, then start picking up that next one at a certain time and so forth. And it's done in reverse on the way back. Now, the development of those routes, we relied on school districts to get their names of the students and addresses and the parents to some degree to your contractors, like I said, and then that goes through the system. The earlier that is and that takes place, that would be more advantageous to those contractors. And I'm sure even the minibus, the special ed buses, which is even more important because we really got to know. I'll give you a funny note. This is kind of funny. I've had about 4 accidents in my life, and all of them have been in school buses. 2 of those school buses, I was in a special ed bus, waiting on the side of the road, waiting for the parents, and the parents were the ones that were in me. But it's a labor of love. You don't just drop kids off and leave them. That was always my thought. I made sure they got home to where they needed to be. But I don't know if I really answered your question clearly.
Yeah, that helped a lot.
Did that help a little bit?
It did. So I understand when you said it would be helpful, the sooner that we can get the names of the kids that we're picking up, the better for you to.
Yeah. Like the issue when
Routes.
she said she just got that notice just the day prior, I can almost guarantee you if we had an extra week earlier on, that extra week is so vital. where the student body's getting larger, this district's getting expanded to some degree. We have more hoops we have to jump through, getting that information to your contractors, even to the busing companies that you have OPS routes. That will help them make that function, that availability known. They'll know they have a need earlier on. They can press that need. One of the things I'd actually thought about several years ago was, why don't we have like the minibus routes currently, the sped routes. We have your larger routes. One of the things we could do also would be to have an additional contractor that's a floating contractor that could cover additional things. If we have an emergency, we have a bus situation, say a bus breaks down on the interstate, the regular route, school bus, we would try to send somebody out there.
Sure.
But if we didn't have somebody available, have another contractor. Chief used to be available to do that. They may not have the newest buses, but if they could pick up our kids and do it safely, I'd be there. And there is one serious thing I've beat up over this over the years, and I was kind of felt a little disheartened by it. Years ago, we had a young lady pass away on 680, if you remember right. She had a seizure, not a seizure, she was choking on the bus. I was first aid certified, and I had a lot of certifications when I was in the military. I could have saved her life if I was there. I wasn't the driver there. She was only minutes away from Children's Hospital. Minutes. If the driver would have just stopped, drove that child there, they would have had a fighting chance. The driver froze. Can we at some point get to the point where we require all drivers to have first aid training? That would be something so powerful, we could actually save lives. I've had students get bloodied and I can't touch them. Okay, here's a first aid kit. There you go. We could kind of do something, but some first aid training. I would like them to have CPR, because I mean, we're all in agreement there. One child's life is worth a little training. I mean, I've had some horrific experiences in my life. I was in the safety department and I watched one young man die on a carrier. In Cairo, Nebraska, I saved 3 children and I watched 2 young adults die. I was one of the first on the scene and I was a responder at that. That bothered me for many years, but just not even a few months ago, we had a student at Monarch High School ran into a telephone pole when he was riding his bike, and I stopped to help that out. But being a first aid trained, like I said, especially as a school bus driver, if teachers aren't being trained, I would at least recommend school bus drivers, because we're the only one out there with them, and it's usually a long time before they could get help if we can't help them.
Okay. Thank
Can
you.
I ask my second
Yeah, go
question?
ahead.
And this is just a follow-up. You talk about first aid training, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the other question I have regarding communication. So if first aid training was required, would that not be required by the transportation service before they hired?
No.
No, I mean, if we were going to do that.
If you required it through OPS, yes, they
And then
could.
the second question is, who's responsible for the communication? Is it the transportation service or is it the school? Who's the one that's communicating to parents, we're gonna be late, or, I'm stuck in the mud, or whatever it
I
is?
actually understand your situation. We had buses that, over the years where they slid or got stuck in the snowstorms and that over the years where we had to communicate with parents. Now, mind you, this was back when I was with Laidlaw. There were some snowstorms at that time. We had multiple buses that did get stuck. What we did was we routed other buses out there. We got these students off the buses, but our office within our own, the driver's side of it, we communicated with our base.
Okay.
They communicated with the parents, but that's where there has been an issue where we're not getting enough information from the school district to the bus company where we can contact everybody. We have to, if their phone number changes and they don't contact us, who do we call? Because by the time we're calling, the school is closed. They don't always have open lines for us. They're not able to get information. I remember this specifically. And that's heartbreaking because you got parents that are worried, kids that are worried. And that's the last thing you want.
Yeah.
That makes any sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did that help?
Yes, that helped a lot. I
like-
understand it a little bit more now.
Like I said, I mean, I felt like I was almost called here now. It's just kind of weird.
Any other questions?
Oh, come on, give me something.
Thank you.
If not, appreciate you very much for testifying.
It's and my pleasure, and I'm sure I'll see some more of your faces later on because I'm pretty active.
Good.
And is it okay if my daughter speaks here momentarily too? Is that possible?
Sure, it's open now to the public, so
Or is it too late?
any,
I just,
uh,
I thought we were doing OPS and then.
yes, actually, OPS is going to
Oh,
testify. Now, if there aren't any other parents, we're gonna have parents first and then go to OPS, I guess.
Or if you maybe want to go quick and maybe get out of here.
They want to just say.
We'll give we'll
They can
give
say hi.
a couple
Yeah.
of minutes to
OPS may take a while.
your students. Yeah, we don't want to force you to wait that long. Sure. Go ahead.
Come on up, girls. Come on up.
I'm in charge of transportation.
We're in the park today.
It is cold. Very cold.
Well, thank you for coming up. First of all, if you could state your name and spell it, please.
My name is Jenny, and it's spelled Jenny.
Thank you.
I'm Julietta, Julietta.
Okay. And I assume it's the same last name?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Go ahead. Thank you.
Candace goes first.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I'll flip a coin. I'll pick a number between 1 and 5.
3.
Yeah, you got it. You're good. You get a pick. No, you get to pick who was first. No, okay, we're good. You're gonna go first. You picked the wrong number. Okay, go ahead. Okay, come on. Do you remember what you wanted to talk about?
I think it was 4 teachers. They were, I think, all special education teachers at some point. They're the only ones I really clicked with. I haven't had any so far now.
Do you remember their names?
It was Miss Jones. I don't know where she is now. She was originally at Ashland Park Elementary. I had 3 others there down at my high school now. I think it was the Papillion, right?
The Olympus Disco, that's where you switch. You went from OPS to Papillion now, that's right.
It was Mr. Baker, Miss Peary, and Miss Matheson. They had done a fairly decent job. The case manager that I was switched over to hasn't been helping as much now. I'm kind of just stuck doing everything on my own now. Why, I'm not really sure. Otherwise, the other teachers have done phenomenal, and they'll even allow me to come down and talk to them every now and then.
Thank you.
Good turn.
Good job.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's start off with my favorite teacher. Her name is Miss Bennett. She is very nice. I treat her very kindly because of that. And whenever I'm feeling down, she tries her best to make me happy.
She's the Vista Liberty School teacher.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And you had one other one you wanted to talk about, right? The one from OPS?
Miss Oldenburg. She is very kind, just like Miss Bennett. Just she is very kind to my dad too. So we bring her gifts every now and then, like presents.
This was, she has kept in touch with my daughter, and my daughter's kept in touch with her years ago. We left OPS years ago, and when she was in National Park, and this is like 5 or 6 years now.
Yes,
That's
in the
cool.
5th grade when I was at school.
About as tall as her now.
She's not very tall.
Yeah.
Great job.
Yes, Miss Oldenburg from Ashland Park Elementary is who we would like to respect immensely, right?
Well, thank you for coming up. I have a question. It sounds like you have experience with several different schools. When you move from one school to another, does that cause some issues with adjusting to the new school or new teachers or new friends?
Well, I usually just am used to the school, and when I leave it, I'm like, I don't know which way I'm supposed to go.
Right.
Yeah, it can be confusing.
Yeah, so I ask for a map. Then I get used to it.
Actually, prior to school and that, I tried. Schools usually, like with students with disabilities, they usually open up earlier on, especially if you talk to the staff. And they allow us to go down and read to our tours, and we practice everything way before. And that extra week, multiple days, especially helps kids with disabilities, so they don't have that. It reduces the fear immensely.
So this is before school starts, so you have an extra week to
Definitely.
adjust and figure out everything that needs to be.
While the teachers are doing in-service, we're kind of wandering around.
Great. Okay, any other questions?
Great job, you guys are awesome.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for coming.
What do you tell them, ladies?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We also have a YouTube channel.
Okay.
You wanna know?
All right.
You wanna know?
Sure.
Our YouTube channel is Two Ladies Midwest Adventures, and we do tons of jokes of the day. We do now and then adventures. I do some cooking.
Okay, sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
You'll learn a lot.
I tried making tortillas.
Great.
So
Well, thank you very much. I'll let my wife know that. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Any other parents that wish to testify, whether you're in OPS or not? Okay, well then we are ready for OPS to come up, and I think we're going to do it as a group or otherwise individually, whatever works
Yeah,
best.
they'll come up later.
Okay, that'd be fine. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Merman, members of the Education Committee. My name is Spencer Head, SPENCERHEAD, and I'm here today as the president of the Omaha Public Schools Board of Education. So it's our understanding that the purpose of today's hearing is to discuss the district's response to the shortage of special education teachers. But before we address that specifically, I think it's important to provide a little bit of context with you. So the Omaha Public Schools serves over 52,000 students. Of those 52,000 plus students, we have 10,851 students with individual education plans, also known as IEPs. This totals 21.3% of our students who have IEPs. By way of context, for the 21-22 school year, 15% of public school students nationwide receive special education services. To provide a little further perspective, OPS has more special education students than 239 of the state's 244 school districts have total students. We have the same number of special education students as the Elkhorn Public Schools has total students. Elkhorn's the 5th largest school district in the state. The Omaha Public Schools has a long history of welcoming all students, especially those with the greatest needs. We can point to many examples of families who have intentionally moved to our district from across the entire state because of the high quality of special education services that we provide. Senator Conrad, this past year, we know you introduced LB 414, which was ultimately approved as part of the LB 705 package. The LB 414 made it more difficult for school districts to reject option enrollment students because of their special education needs. I sit before you proudly today to say that the Omaha Public Schools has never turned away a student because of their special education needs. Education is heavily regulated by both the state and federal law. Special education is even more stringent. The Individuals with Disabilities Act, also known as IDEA, requires that once a student is found to be eligible under one of 13 specific disability categories, a team needs to develop an IEP to ensure that the student receives a free and appropriate public education, also known as a FAPE. regardless of what it costs. The team is called an IEP team and includes the parents or guardians of the students, anyone that the parent or guardian wishes to invite that has information about the student when appropriate, and multiple educators. A typical IEP team can be anywhere between 5 to 15 members, depending on the student's needs. The district is required to convene an IEP meeting at least annually, and parents or district staff can request the meetings be convened more frequently if the student's individual situation requires it. IEP meetings can last from 1 to 5 hours and usually need to be held either before or after school. The entire process is governed by very specific rules and regulations adopted by the Nebraska Department of Education. These rules and regulations require very specific timelines and notice requirements. It's a complicated process with one primary goal: to ensure that the students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate public education. And the Omaha Public Schools takes this responsibility extremely seriously. Let me now turn to the underlying issue. First, I want to note that the Omaha Public Schools has been transparent through the entire process. The information I'm sharing with you today was presented as an information item at a board meeting, and the district has been communicating regularly with its affected families, employees, and other key stakeholders. As the Nebraska Department of Education has already noted, our state is approximately 20% of its special education teacher positions currently vacant. Let's see. The Omaha Public Schools is similarly affected, except as exemplified by my comments above, we're affected on a much larger scale. We currently have 133 special education teacher vacancies. This has a significant impact on teacher caseloads. During the 1920 school year, each special education teacher in our district had a caseload of 23 students. Last year, each special education teacher had a caseload of 30 students. This year, the average special education teacher has a caseload of 31. As you might imagine, the increasing caseloads also exacerbate the problem as more teachers decide to leave. We're using every resource available to help us address the shortage. The Omaha Public Schools currently pays new teachers with a bachelor's degree $49,500 per year, which makes it the top starting salary in the state, and special education teachers receive an additional 7% salary premium. We offer general education and other personnel extra duty pay for attending IEP meetings outside of their regular duty hours. Our special education supervisors are carrying a caseload for the second year in a row, as well as supervising general education teachers who are assisting special education teachers. We're utilizing virtual services for speech language services where appropriate, using licensed Nebraska teachers. We've also identified every administrator in our central office with a special education endorsement, and all but 2 currently have a caseload. Unfortunately, the need's even greater. We have been providing services at all of our 87 schools, as well as all of our programs, facilities, and to non-public schools. That has been our service model, and in an ideal world will continue to be. However, this year, for the first time in our history, amid a statewide and national shortage of qualified teachers, there are 3 schools where we have no special education teachers. Those 3 schools have 137 students with IEPs. I want to directly address what, based on my conversations with you and your staff in preparation for the hearing, is a significant underlying concern for the committee. The 3 schools with vacancies are all in North Omaha. The Omaha Public Schools didn't choose these schools. The schools with vacancies are a direct result of staff resignations. After exploring multiple options, we determined that the best way to serve those students was to move them to a school where we could provide the services they needed. Each affected student is receiving the special education services to which they're entitled. In addition, every affected student is being provided door-to-door transportation from their home to the school where they will be served. Parents who choose to transport their own students are also reimbursed for mileage. And to answer a question that I know you're probably going to have, yes, we did consider whether we should move staff from other schools to the 3 affected schools. Ultimately, we determined that such a move would have a ripple effect, affecting even more students and families. For that reason, we chose the approach we did. None of this was decided lightly. Our board members and most of our staff are parents of students that we have too. I think it's critically important to state clearly that every single one of our students with an IEP will be receiving the services that they need. The only thing that's changing for the students of those 3 schools is the location where those services are provided. We recognize that this solution is not ideal, and we understand that it's an unexpected change for students and families. We also understand that the timing of these decisions required last-minute changes affecting students. Our staff was recruiting qualified employees throughout the entire summer. Our organization worked tirelessly to avoid impacting students, and we continue to recruit teachers and do so year-round. While we hope that this move is temporary, we recognize that some aspects of these staffing shortages are beyond our control. To that end, we have identified barriers to certification and licensure that we think could be addressed to help alleviate the situation now and in the future. We lose applicants to Iowa on a college course that applicants have to enroll in and pay for in order to receive their licensure. We wonder whether this could be offered as an NDE online course instead. That would potentially make it easier for current licensed teachers to add content endorsement by demonstrating proficiency in content in the content. Another option might be to permit applications to take existing praxis exams without taking additional coursework. We have shared these ideas and others with the Department of Education and are happy to be part of the conversation moving forward. One other issue that's created significant stress within the special education community is what we'll call the lawyerification of the IEP process. And what I mean by that is 5 years ago, on average, the Omaha Public Schools had 5 cases that involved parents with lawyers coming to IEP meetings. Last school year, we had nearly 300, and that doesn't include guardians ad litem. The huge increase in cases is largely a result of the juvenile court appointing legal counsels to intervene in the special education process, usually in cases that have nothing to do with the schools. The courts go so far as to appoint attorneys to serve as educational decision makers, and then at the same time appoint other attorneys to represent the attorneys that they just appointed to make educational decisions. It's a process that really makes no sense. IEPs are meant to be collaborative rather than combative endeavors. We believe that our collective bargaining partners will share with you what our teachers, nurses, psychologists, and other dedicated professionals have told us. IEP meetings involving lawyers have turned into mini trials. District staff have to justify every comment and conclusion and they're often treated as if they're the ones on trial. The district currently has 2 in-house attorneys, one of whom spends the vast majority of her time dealing with special education cases. And we're currently advertising to hire another one whose entire caseload will be special education cases. We have thousands of dedicated staff members in the district who choose to be educators because they deeply care about students and they want to serve the students to the best of their ability every day. With that, we're always striving to improve education for our students, and we appreciate the opportunity to share more about our district. I brought with me today Mr. Charles Wakefield, who's our Chief Operations and Talent Officer, and also Kara Saldierna, who's our Executive Director of Special Education. And if it's okay with the committee, we'd like to have all 3 of us up here. That way, whatever questions you have, one of the 3 of us would be able to field if that's.
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
fine. So
Perfect.
go ahead and continue with the next testifier.
Figure that way we're not constantly switching out.
Yeah, I think this will work out better. Then we can fire questions at all 3 of
Yeah,
them.
this way we don't have to constantly be switching
Sure.
out depending on who has what. Charles in the middle. Thank you.
I'd only ask 2 things. One, speak a little louder, and whoever's answering the questions, just start by saying your first name so the
Yeah,
transcribers can know who it is.
Well, did the other 2 have presentations first to start with or not?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
No. Probably state and spell your name out first.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chairman Merman, members of the Education Committee. My name is Charles Wakefield, CHARLES, WAKEFIELD. I'm currently the Chief Officer for Operations and Talent for Omaha Public Schools.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Kara Saldierna, KARASALDIERNA, and I'm here today as Executive Director of Special Education.
Thank you. Okay, any questions from Senator Linehan?
So you said the average was 21.3 students have special, or that's what you have, 21.3% of the students at OPS have an IEP.
Correct.
So I've got the snapshots from your website from King Elementary, which is one of the schools, right? And they're at 23. But Central Park's at 17.2, and Walnut Hill is at, which I question this a lot, is at 10.4%. So why did these three schools get picked?
So you want to take that or you want to?
Thank you, Senator Linehan. We had staff resignations in these three schools. Our HR department worked all summer to try to hire for these three schools. but
How
we're-
many staff resignations?
There were 5 staff at those schools, 4 resigned, 1 transferred.
5 in all 3 schools?
Combined, yes, ma'am.
Well, that's not, how many special ed teachers were there in those schools?
5.
You had that many kids and you only had 5 special ed teachers in the whole all 3 buildings?
Correct, ma'am.
What was their caseload?
And I'd have to,
Yeah, we have to, the numbers, our average caseload was around 30 last year. Our numbers fluctuate from year to year at individual schools as families move around. So we'd have to check last year's data to see what last year's caseload and numbers were for the teachers who were assigned there last year.
Well, if you had 4 out of 5 resign, it would seem maybe they were too high.
Yep.
and we've experienced a special ed teacher shortage for several years now, Senator Linehan. That's one of the major staffing shortages for school districts across the nation.
Yeah, I'm aware. Are you able, if you wanted to pay people who are willing to work in these schools more money than the union wage?
We would have to negotiate that with our union, ma'am, is my understanding.
So you're not able to. So if somebody was willing to go to King Elementary because they made 30% more, you're unable to do that.
Correct, ma'am.
Thank you.
Senator Wayne.
Okay, so first, I have a conflict in the fact that I represent a family who probably will have litigation over their particular special education. It does not affect any of these 3 schools or pertain to any of these 3 schools or anything like that. But I want to put that out there because my conflicts matter and nobody else's does. So with that being said, why do you think there is the lawyerization lately by the juvenile courts regarding special education at OPS?
So the juvenile courts are appointing education counsel, and the youth that are represented have a variety of needs. These are youth that have needs outside the school, sometimes not permanent placement, sometimes their families have needs, and certainly some of the students have difficulties in school as well. And so the decision has been made by the juvenile court to appoint education counsel to assist in navigating.
Does that say something that is so complicated that the court doesn't believe their kids are being served in Omaha Public Schools, that they have to have an attorney navigate it? Does that not ring a bell to the school system that it might be that complicated?
I would say that many of the students that are represented are making progress, and we are serving very well. They have teachers, they have services, they're getting their services. Many of the challenges that these students have challenges outside of the school system.
So once, I ain't going to have path all day and I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but Charles, do you feel this is a dip, or is this going to keep, or is this a nosedive going straight down that we're not going to be able to fulfill these?
That is the $64,000 question. Teacher shortage is a significant issue across the nation, whether you're small town Nebraska or New York City. States across the nation are looking for alternative solutions for teacher shortage. And Bureau of Labor is indicating that we need more teachers than we're currently graduating the system.
No, I respect that answer all the surrounding school districts outside of Omaha are filling their special ed. So the question is this a blip or is this a nosedive for Omaha Public Schools? Because Rawson's not having this problem, Westside's not having this problem, Millard, and even combined collectively, they have roughly the same amount of kids. They're not having this problem. So you were head of HR before, like, is this you have to be telling me, is this a blip that we can fix or not fixable?
I do believe it's fixable, Senator Wayne. I do believe that with the right work, we can grow the teachers we need to. I do think it's going to take time.
How many people have certificates right now that are in the TAC building in special ed?
I don't have that answer off the top of my head. The remaining staff in the TAC building that have special ed certification are special ed supervisors who support special ed teachers. And as Mr. Head said, all but 2 of them have caseloads already. So they are currently supporting special ed students with services and with IEP management.
So before closings, I'm a little shocked that you don't have that number, because before moving 147 families, I would think as a board member, you would want to know who could we put from TAC into buildings before we disrupt schools. So was that never presented as an option to the board?
No, those numbers were presented. I just don't have that right in front of me, so I'd hate to quote a number that was inaccurate for you. We did look at that and do that. Those staff are supporting several of our other schools as well.
Were they supporting those before the school year started or since the school year started?
We had staff in TAC supporting schools last year as well. The schools they supported and the students they supported may have changed as we started the school year.
So how many of those, this is to special ed, how many of the students in these 3 schools did not have transportation? They walked to their school or their parents drove them down the block. How many of them were neighborhood? Because neither one of those schools are magnets.
I don't have that number off the top of my head. Are you asking how many of them did not previously receive door-to-door transportation?
Correct.
I don't have that number.
Would you say that there's any of them?
There potentially could have been some of them.
Then how do you add to an IEP transportation without a mandatory meeting and conference? Because you can't add something to an IEP without a conference and at least a consent being signed.
So you can amend an IEP. And so what we did was talk to the families. We called all the families on August 8th and had personal conversations with them about the options, and then discussed with them that we would be adding transportation if they chose that option or if they would prefer reimbursement through.
Did they sign documentation or we just had a phone call?
We did a personal phone call, and then we made home visits if we couldn't get a hold of them via phone.
Interesting. How many of these students' IEPs changed now that they're going to a new school?
It would depend on if they had transportation previously or if we amended the IEP to add transportation.
So let's say one of their medical diagnosis is anxiety. Wouldn't that require a new IEP for removing them from their environment because you would be triggering essentially the anxiety? How did you handle that?
So we are not required to hold an IEP if we are offering the same services in a different location. And so we are offering and providing the same services the students were receiving, with the exception of adding transportation. So we are not required to hold an IEP to do that because we're not changing the placement.
You're not adding any more supports?
Transportation, we're adding transportation as a related service. If a student needs additional support, so take your example, a student with anxiety that struggled when they moved, that current IEP team would be needing to add additional supports at the new school if that student required it.
Have all those been held? It's over 30 days now.
If a student requires additional support, then the teams would hold those whenever they needed to. So some could have been held and some might be upcoming, or some students are thriving in their new schools.
Spencer, you testified about the ripple effect if you were to move 5, in this case now 5 teachers. What did you mean by that versus the ripple effect of 147 families?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, in deciding, we had 5 teachers from these schools that either resigned or transferred out. And so we had the option of, obviously moving the kids out of these schools to schools where we provide them services, or transferring teachers from schools that have them to these schools to meet their needs. So the ripple effect would be what effect does that have on the students that we're moving the teacher away from? But also, teachers have a right in determining where they want to work and what school they want to be in. And so it's entirely possible, and it's happened in the past, if we move a teacher, the teacher's going to resign because in the Omaha metro area, there's 7 public school districts plus a whole bunch of different private schools that they can go work for, and everybody's hiring right now. And so at the end of the day, the decision was made that it's better to move these 137 students versus moving staff, reallocating staff, and potentially affecting way more than 137 families.
I'll come back.
I've got a question, and it's kind of related, I think, to everything you've answered. I think you said you're 131 special ed teachers short in OPS.
I want to say it's 133,
Okay.
if I remember correctly.
So it's 133, and it was only 5 that you were short in these 3 schools. You've tried everything possible to move 5 into those 3. I mean, that's a very small number to at least get 5.
So with 133 teachers short across the district, almost every school has a shortage and not enough special ed teachers to meet the caseload that we would like a teacher to have. If we would have moved a teacher from an existing school, that would impact the students in that school that they were already serving.
Mm-hmm.
That teacher already has relationships with those kids, has already made connections with those kids, has relationships with the adults serving those kids in other areas, which impacts and enhances that educational environment. So if we move 5 teachers from 5 different schools into these schools, not only would we be impacting the school, these 3 schools, we'd be impacting the other 5 schools those teachers were moved from, thereby doubling, tripling, however many, but increasing the number of students impacted.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that definitely would be an impact on the other schools and parents and students especially, like you said, but having 137 families have to move, or I think 137 students have to move, seems like that would even be a bigger impact.
And it definitely is an impact, and we recognize that, and we regret this. We'd love to have every position filled. We would. But looking at the bigger picture across the district and how do we utilize the resources so we impact as few families as possible, we impact as few children as possible, that we provide services in the best possible way, and making those decisions is the task that we were left with. We did everything possible to hire teachers. We visited 20 states over the course of the last school year. We attended over 100 certified job fairs just for teachers. We visited every state in the Midwest that allowed us to visit. And many of our Midwestern states are moving to where colleges only allow school districts within that state to attend their job fairs, because every state has experienced this in some way. But we even put, and I won't name the school districts or the cities because they're still mad at me. We put billboards advertising our pay and benefits in metro areas within a couple hours drive of Omaha, larger districts, advertising to steal their teachers away from them. We were doing everything we thought possible, social media advertising. If you know what geofencing is, using that to attract teachers who step into anything education related. Doing massive amounts of work through human resources, through special ed, through our teachers, through our principals, to get as many staff as possible.
I would add on to that. We have 9 high schools now with the opening of 2 new schools last year. And in each of our 9 high schools, we also offer a teaching as a profession pathway or academy. And so we're trying to develop our own pipeline of teachers and students who are interested in going into education in the future, identifying them early, following up with them. We started a few years ago hiring high school students to help out with next level learning, which is our summer school model, teaching some of the younger kids. And again, that's identifying students within our schools who might have an interest in teaching, who might be good people to go into the field in the future, so that we can kind of start developing our own pipeline. this is something that we started really in full force last year. So it's going to be several years before we start to see the benefits. But it's another avenue that we're taking to start addressing the teacher shortage at least as best as we can.
And if I may add, we have a program called Parent Educator, where we take our adults who work with our kids already, who are successful with our students already, and we will pay for them to go back to school to become teachers for our district. I do believe Channel 7 in the local Omaha area ran a story on our Parent Educator and some of the success of it just last night, or it might have ran this morning. I get confused. But that is a program we've had in our district for over 10 years, growing paras to be teachers for us. So we've been working on this problem for a while. It's a challenge for us, and we are making strides, but it's still a difficult challenge.
Sure. I don't want to overemphasize the point, but I think you had 21 special ed students per teacher, average per special ed teacher. So if only 5 out of the whatever number of special ed teachers there are moved, it would affect less than, I would think, less than 1 student per special ed teacher. And then you wouldn't have to affect 137 families.
5 years ago, our caseload average was 21 per special ed teacher. Last year it was 30 per special ed teacher.
Okay, I thought you said 31 first, and then I thought
This year,
Linehan's question, it was 21, so I wasn't sure. But.
Yeah, so the average caseload is 31 students per special ed teacher. The 21 is in relation to the total percentage of our student population that has an IEP.
Yeah, that's 31, especially would be way too many, I would think, but still, it would only be less than 1, if you could move 5. But any other questions? Yes, Sarah Conrad.
Thank you, Chair Merman. Thanks all for being here. I appreciate that you have tough jobs under the best of circumstances, let alone when you're dealing with a lot of challenges. Like other employers, other institutions are grappling with low unemployment, which is kind of a blessing and a curse when you're trying to hire and retain, workforce development issues. The list goes on and on, ever increasing costs with inflation and fuel and health insurance. I know you're juggling a lot to make things work while also trying to educate future generations and how critically important that is, of course, and core to your mission and core to why you're all drawn to those professions. So that being said, I do want to make sure that I have a clear understanding of kind of how we got to where we were today so that we can identify solutions to move forward. So in particular, you noted that there were resignations and or transfers at these 3 elementary schools. When did that happen?
I don't have the exact date. I do know
Roughly.
Most of those resignations happened in late April.
I was going to say, because I know there's a process with contract and otherwise. So basically, it became, the district became aware that there weren't going to be special education teachers at these schools in North Omaha in April, and parents were notified that they weren't going to have services for their kids at these schools in mid-August.
We became aware of the vacancy in April. We continue to hire throughout the summer for teachers. So we hire teachers August 1st, August 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
So we're continuing to hire throughout the summer, and our intent all along was to do everything humanly possible to fill these positions.
Sure, and let's talk more about that because I've heard you say that quite a few times. I want to make sure that the committee understands what that means, and it kind of dovetails on what Senator Linehan was talking about as well. When you say we try and do everything possible, it's nice to show up at a job fair and do a social media post or a billboard post, creative, important, but what else are you doing? When did you talk to the State Department of Education to see if you could do emergency provisions on certification or licensure? When did you open up or reopen up discussions with the unions to say, we need to be able to offer incentives or bonus or stipend to attract people in here? Were those kind of steps taken? And if so, when?
So we discussed with our union last winter, and that 7% premium that Mr. Head mentioned in his testimony was agreed to during that time period. Previously, that had been at 5%. So a special ed teacher gets that base salary of roughly 48,000. 7% above that is added to their salary for doing special ed to recognize that work they would do. Previous contract years, that was 5%. So that was something the district did intentionally to incentivize special ed for our district as we go. We have regular conversations with NDE. Certification is a huge issue and concern for us. And how we recognize out-of-state certifications is a huge issue and concern with us. So staff and human resources talk with certification office weekly as we go through the spring and the summer as we're trying to get teachers certified and recognizing what will be recognized and not be recognized to be brought into our state. We've had conversations with staff at NDE as well about some of the concerns we've had with, or some of the ideas, I guess I shouldn't say concerns, ideas we have about certification and things that we've seen in other states that may or may not work as well.
Okay. So what's the status of those conversations right now?
My understanding was NDE staff were at a meeting this morning. I'm not sure I understand the full purpose of that meeting, discussing some of those as well. I don't know what their status is as far as moving forward with any of those.
And so you haven't reopened negotiations or made inquiries to the union or otherwise since last winter?
No, we negotiated our contract last winter, which did provide significant raises for all teachers and that additional raise for that special ed teacher.
Okay, but clearly it's not sufficient, right? If you're still having district-wide shortages and most acutely at schools in North Omaha. So what is the process? Is there a process to reopen those negotiations because of exigent circumstances or otherwise?
We could request that of our.
Why have you not?
We could request that of our union. Most teachers at this point are under contract with other districts, and breaking contract is a breach of their license, which they risk losing their license if they left their district to come to our district at this point. And I want to recognize, while we've done a lot, there's not teachers out there. The enrollment in colleges of education have dramatically decreased over the past 10 years. Special ed especially, but there aren't teachers available to hire right now. And we scavenge every week again, but no matter how much money we add to the contract, and I would love to pay teachers triple, quadruple what we pay now. But no matter how much money we add to the contract, we've got to have the people to do it. I heard earlier testimony about bus drivers. Same situation. There aren't people out there that qualify, can do CDLs, maintain that licensure to drive our buses, regardless of how much money. We've seen that in Omaha. If you've watched how we've addressed our contractor STA over the past year, we've raised bus driver salary significantly in order to increase bus drivers. And that's not doing it because there's just not bodies out there that will do that work for us.
Okay, I understand the contract complications for folks who are already under contract with other districts or what have you, but you indicated that you were hiring through early August. And so you knew that you had this resignation transfer problem in April. You negotiated the contracts last winter. You're grappling, no solutions after everything that you've tried. And all that time, you never reached back to the union to renegotiate?
No, we did not.
How many vacancies do you have at the TAC building?
I don't have that number specifically. We have not filled vacancies at the TAC building for probably 6 months. And we've filled very limited number of vacancies at the TAC building in the past 2 years.
And what's the average salary there for those administrators?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I'd have to get that for you.
You are in charge of HR though, yes?
Yes.
Can you give me a range?
An administrator in the TAC building will make anywhere between $80,000 and $140,000.
Okay. So the other thing that I'm really worried about is the lack of transparency and communication. And I know Mr. Head talked about this a little bit during his opening comments, which I appreciated and provided a lot of additional information and insight. I think he indicated that there was a discussion of this maybe at a summer board meeting or something to that effect. Sometimes those are covered by the news media, sometimes they're not. Maybe they covered it, or maybe they didn't as granularly as possible. But one thing that was shocking to me, and the many families and educators that I've been in communication with over the past couple weeks, is that they were so taken by surprise when they received these notices right before school was ready to start, and really under an incredible amount of duress and coercion and pressure to either make snap decisions to waive their children's rights to special education services, or to take up uncertain opportunities with transportation and new schools and what have you. So maybe you did have a chance to talk about it at a school board meeting this summer, and that's something that we can go back and double check at. But, you know, I was Googling around trying to get more information in preparation for this hearing, and I see OPS putting out all kinds of kind of rah-rah stories for back to school. We're ready, full steam ahead, no worries. Yeah, we have some staffing problems, but no worries. So what's really going on there? I get PR, I get putting on a good face, and I get that there's other good stories to tell beyond what we're focusing on in this hearing. But that really seems incongruent with the reality that you were grappling with and that these families were going to be facing.
I would say that in general, there were lots of families that did have teachers, and once we offered new schools to these families and to these students, all of our students were in schools where they could receive services. So I don't want to discount how painful that was for families to receive those phone calls a week before school started, or discount how frustrating that is for them. But we were prepared to provide special ed services to all of those families and to all of those students on the first day of school. Again, not discounting how frustrating or inconvenient that was for the families. But so we were ready in that sense. And we have amazing schools. You heard from Ms. Escobar and her, that she's very happy with the services that she's getting now. So across the district, we have students who are making progress, who are excelling. And those are stories that we want to share and that we want to tell. And again, not to discount the experience that these families have had, but our students are amazing, our teachers are amazing, our district is amazing, and there's amazing work happening, and we want to showcase that when we have that opportunity.
Right. And these kinds of instances make that a lot harder to do, right? And what is also, I'm going to be really honest here, really shocking to me as a state senator is the lack of communication to this committee and to this legislature when these issues arose. I mean, I reached out right away after the headlines broke, trying to figure out what was going on, and I heard nothing from OPS. Nothing. And that's one of the reasons that we're here at this hearing. And I think that's really shocking because how much do you spend on lobbyists?
Roughly $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. And how many administrators interact with state leaders? I mean, your superintendent, how many associate superintendents do you have? How many school board members do you have? And nobody can return an email?
Who did you reach out to, Sarah?
Megan?
I'll follow up.
Okay. Sorry.
All right.
Sorry. Let me ask the specific question here. So, because I think we're kind of dancing around it as well. Obviously, there's a teacher shortage crisis in Nebraska at OPS across the country. It's most acute for special ed teachers, and I appreciate and understand that. But that's well established. That's not new or different this year, right? This is an issue that you've had to plan around, think around, work within in probably recent memory, right? And that's something that we've tried to take steps on together, thanks to your support and advocacy as a legislature. Thanks to Senator Linehan for stipends and bonuses, Senator Vargas for praxis, alternative certification, para to educator, teacher compacts, recognizes that we're trying to, right? Because it impacts all of us. And every single one of us in the Nebraska family want the same things ultimately, right? Why are there 3 schools in North Omaha, our state's most under-resourced community, that don't have special education teachers this year? Was that a huge red flag for you? How did you walk through and talk through and think through the racial justice considerations with that?
Our goal was making sure that every student was able to receive special ed services. And it was not our choice that it was those 3 schools. We did not choose those 3 schools. Teachers resigned, and so that was not our choice. What we did have control over was to ensure that students at those schools were able to receive special education services. And so we were able to offer choices. Many families chose to stay at schools in North Omaha and stay close to home, and then some families chose schools further away. We gave families a variety of choices to make that process as easy as possible for them. So that was our goal, was to make sure every student there was able to receive the services that they're entitled to.
Sure.
And that required movement, unfortunately.
Last question. For the resignations, did you do exit interviews to figure out why they left?
We do exit interviews, yes. Those are anonymous. I will tell you, 1 staff member stayed home to be a mother.
Sure.
1 staff member left teaching altogether. 1 staff member went to Iowa.
Okay, so there's some personal circumstances, of course, but when you look at exit interviews, grappling with teacher recruitment and retention district-wide, what does it tell you? Is it behavior? Is it political culture? Is it money? Is it a lack of support for front lines? What are the trends? What are the issues? What are teachers telling you about why they're leaving?
With special ed teachers, we hear a lot of concerns about the amount of paperwork. To an individual, our special ed teachers love working with our students, and they want to spend their day doing that, and we bless them for that. They get frustrated with the amount of paperwork associated with managing an IEP and that extra workload.
Okay, that's it for now, and I might have some follow-ups. Thanks.
Senator Wayne, did you?
Yesterday, you guys had your budget hearing. Are you guys lowering your levy or keeping it the same?
The recommendation as of right now would be going down slightly, a little under a penny.
A penny or 2 cents? 3 cents? 2 cents?
A little under a penny.
Okay, just want to make sure. And so one of the things we did was open book when I was on the board. Whoever thought of that idea, that wasn't me, it's a great idea. So I'm going into the budget, in the proposed budget, and at the schools, in these 3 schools, staff is all being reduced. Particularly special ed staff are being reduced. You have King Science Center going from 4.17 to 3.2, Central going from 3.5 to 3.05. Is it the plan not to bring back special education to these schools?
The plan is to bring back special education to these schools. The budget process was trying to be more realistic with our budget and not budgeting for positions we weren't sure we could fill. We do have money set aside in a reserve for when we do fill these positions to add that budget back to the school, but trying to avoid a situation where we had over budgeted a school and had excessive reserves at the end of the year.
Why can't you temporary fill these positions like you would with any other sub? Like why was that route not explored? As retired people?
Route was absolutely explored, and we do use long-term subs where we can. Long-term subs aren't necessarily special ed certified, and teacher shortage. The first symptom of teacher shortage is a substitute shortage, and we fight a substitute teacher shortage more than we fight a teacher shortage as we go through. And to do a long-term, you have to be fully certified in the state of Nebraska. You hear a lot about the idea of a local sub, which is a great program and very valuable to us. But a local sub has a limit on number of days and really can't serve in that long-term position. So that teacher shortage is really expressing itself in multiple ways.
You said one transferred. Why did you allow one to transfer and not deny the transfer based off of need?
The individual transferred to another school that had a great need as well in East Omaha.
Is that school on the verge of not having any special education?
That teacher serves 2 schools that had significant special ed shortages, yes.
Are there any current schools that are significantly short of special education teachers where if one decides to resign tomorrow, you'll have to figure out where to send these kids? How dire is the situation?
We do have schools, especially at the secondary level, that are short special ed teachers, that if we had a teacher or 2 walk away, that would be a significant impact for us.
So then how many teachers or staff in general, including TAC, that are not in special ed have special ed certificates?
Not as many as you would think. I would say just under 150. I'm trying to go back to that spreadsheet that we looked at, but we did look at that, yes.
So just under 150 that are not teaching in special ed that have special ed certificates?
Yes.
And you telling me we couldn't find 5 that we could pay extra pay under a short-term sub? Like they could literally resign from the district and come in short. There's ways to do it. And we couldn't find 5 to go to the union and say, we need to figure this out for the sake of kids.
Again,
out of 150, we couldn't find 5.
Again, the impact on the students that they are already serving, our class
No,
size.
then we mixed question. My question was teachers who are, or staff who are not currently in special ed that have special ed certificates.
And for almost all of them are currently serving students in a classroom in another capacity.
Okay. So if we know right now at the secondary, there's high schools that if 1 or 2 left, what's your contingency plan?
We continue to look to hire. We had hosted a virtual job interview fair 2 days this week. We interviewed every student teacher in the Omaha metro area that would interview with us. That is slated to graduate in December with the intent of and actually offering jobs to them now, pending successful completion of their student teaching. It's continuing to look. We work actively with Offutt Air Force Base. We have military families moving in and out of the city on a regular basis, and some of them, the spouses are teacher certified. So we're constantly digging as deep as we can to find staff.
Open book was the way it got us. I just got reminded. So here's my problem right now. You're doing all this extra stuff, but you haven't talked to the union, which you say is a roadblock to putting teachers there. I'm not understanding the disconnect right now.
So we have spoken with our union about the issue. We haven't renegotiated a contract to add wages to that.
So here it is September. We're hoping at the high school level, 1 or 2 teachers don't get burned out. Don't get injured. That could literally shut down the high school, and we don't have a real contingency plan at this point. We haven't reached out to the 150 teachers who are working in a different capacity, because it seems that, to your point, it's a lot easier to put subs on a regular teacher than it is a special ed. So what are we doing? I'm good.
I have a question. Go ahead, Senator Linehan.
All 3 of these schools are needs improvement schools, right? They've been needs improvements for a long time.
I believe so. That's outside my realm.
I'm not sure either.
It's on the website. I checked. Okay. Has the Department of Ed ever been in those schools to help? Aren't they supposed to come to schools that are needs improvement and help?
I'm not aware that they have been there, but it could be that they were there with the principal or they were there with somebody else.
Well, can we check that out if they've ever been there? 2 questions. How long have they been special needs? not special needs, excuse me, needs improvement schools for how many years? And has the Department of Ed ever contacted the school to try and help the needs improvement schools, which is supposed to be what they're doing?
We can get you that information. Senator.
Thank you. I'm really concerned that you've moved these children to different school. Some of them are going to be great stories. Ponca, I've heard Ponca's marked as an excellent school. I just checked after they came. Small school. Okay. Are those kids going to be able to stay at Ponca?
Yes,
Through 8th grade?
well,
Six.
through
Good.
5th or 6th, whatever the
Fifth.
ending grade is, yes.
They'll stay at the school. That's, you
That-
guarantee those families that they are not
Yes.
going to have to move again.
Yes, we will not move them unless the families request to be moved. That would be some families might choose to move back to their home school, but we anticipate that once the students have transitioned and they're having positive experiences, we're not looking at moving them back, so no.
It seems to me, we're going to talk about things that we don't talk about. You talk about what the base salary is. Young people don't work for base salaries anymore. Young people don't graduate from college and say, oh, I think I'll wait 10 years before I make enough money to buy a house. So when is OPS and all the other schools going to figure out that you're going to have a teacher shortage until you don't pay them in a wage scale that nobody else does anymore because it doesn't work?
I would agree, Senator Linehan. As a state, our average teacher salary is much lower than the national average. Is something I think we need to work on as a
Whoa, whoa,
state.
whoa. Our teacher salaries are lower than what national average?
If we look at the ranking of states with teacher salaries, Nebraska is nowhere near the top 10. We're in the middle to lower portion of that, according to the information I have.
Okay, well, we need to share notes. What is the teacher who's been there 10 years with a special ed degree making?
I would have to pull actual contract and look up the number. Part of that would depend on the amount of education they had. Teachers
A
can,
master's special ed, they've been there 10 years.
probably 60,000 range. I'd have to look for exact. 65.
They have a master's special ed degree, they've been there 10 years.
And Senator Linden, I'd have to pull a table
Okay.
and look at the salary table. Those
I'd
are
like to-
published on our website.
I think the committee it'd be helpful if we could see those tables.
We'll get that.
Okay, I have a question. At the start of the school year, I think it was reported you were 160 special ed teachers short, and now you're 133 special ed teachers short. Is that correct or pretty close?
You're correct. That's what we reported in August board meeting. The number reported in the August board meeting included all staff under the OEA agreement who support special ed. So, and non-OEA and employees outside that agreement. So school psychologists, social workers, we lumped all those together because they all provide supporting functions for special ed. The 133 that we report today is classroom teachers.
Okay, so you didn't hire 27 new special ed teachers?
Unfortunately, no.
They were already in place as classroom teachers?
Yes.
Because my question was, wouldn't any of those 27 you hired be moved to these 3 schools? But they were in place already, so, okay. Then another question I have, OPS received a lot of COVID funding, federal funding. How much of that was spent on increasing the special ed capacity?
Wasn't spent specifically on special ed. We did provide a $4,500 stipend, a retention stipend for every employee in the district. We also increased teacher loss of plan wages. So if a teacher gives up their contractually guaranteed plan time to cover a classroom, we increased that from 30, I forget now, it's been a year, to $50 an hour. So significant increase in loss of plan pay. We began paying for home visits, which supports kids in loss of learning. And then we also began paying for summer school next level learning for our staff as well.
Okay, but actual expenditures for increasing the special ed workforce was the 4,500.
All staff received the 4,500. There was nothing specific just for special ed teachers.
Okay, in hindsight, should more of the COVID funds been spent on special ed, increasing special ed capacity?
It's an interesting question, Senator. We face a staffing shortage across many levels, not just teachers. So that $4,500 was to retain staff we had that did great work for us during COVID and to entice staff to come to us at all levels. Everybody in the school educates a child. Everybody in the school supports a child. And so we wanted to make sure that we were retaining great staff across the board.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Senator Conrad?
Thank you so much, Chair. And let me also start by saying I appreciate that OPS has taken a lot of really courageous positions in this legislature, and that doesn't go unnoticed by me. There's a lot of other school districts that don't face the friendly fire and come down here and take hard positions, particularly for vulnerable kids. So I really want to make sure the record's clear about that, and thank you for your leadership in that regard, because I think it's really important, and hopefully will encourage more schools to come in and big, strong voices on those other key issues in education. But I do want to learn more about this, because I think this is an OPS issue, clearly acutely in North Omaha. We've established it's a statewide issue, national issue as well. But knowing all that, I just want to get a better understanding about some of the dollars and cents that Senator Wayne started talking about as well. So, and I don't pretend to have the expertise on your budget like Senator Wayne, and I'm sure Mr. Head has, but roughly speaking, and I know you're a huge district, 50,000 kids, 5,000 teachers, 4,500 teachers or support staff and administrators. It's 111 buildings. It's a huge institution. But what's your overall budget generally? Just like top lines estimate ish? Maybe just have it pulled up.
This past year was 710 million.
Okay.
Proposed budget for next year, I believe, is 727.
Okay. Okay.
2.4%.
Okay. And so you saw, and maybe it hasn't all trickled out yet, but massive increases in state aid, including in special education funding. Every level of government in Nebraska is experiencing a quote unquote windfall because of property tax valuations. We had an influx of COVID dollars coming into the state and into the communities to deal with COVID over the last many years, which of course were one time and temporary and don't fit well with ongoing costs, but were meant to help during that stressful time. So, and I'm guessing your budget is much like our state agency budgets, other private employers where you have what, 80, 85% are salary and benefits, or a pretty significant chunk, whatever it might be.
79.
Okay. Okay. And then you're sitting on how many in reserves? How much in reserves ish?
Don't have a number off the top of my head. It's the 20% statutory max.
Okay. So what's your philosophy then on utilization of those reserves? They're there for emergencies?
Mhm.
Is this an emergency?
That's something we've been looking at using the reserves for. We've our budget every year includes money taken out of the reserves and then they're replenished. If
Right.
There's a budget budget favorability at the end of the year. Obviously, we
Right.
replenish at that 100% max. But yes, we are with our budget proposal for the incoming year. We will be utilizing money out of the reserves.
And I understand that's not an ongoing solution because it's one-time money that you've squirreled away to help deal with unforeseen or exigent circumstances. It's part of sound governance and budgeting, but when there are emergencies, we do need to tap into those savings as well. I'm, again, don't think this is probably unique to OPS, but definitely something that I've been thinking about a lot and we've talked about as members of this committee. And my inbox is full of feedback from teachers across the state as well. I think in addition to the racial justice considerations I'm concerned about with how this is playing out in North Omaha, I think that we have this much broader problem when it comes to the fact that we just simply are not valuing teachers in this society or in Nebraska, and we're not paying them for the professionals that they are. And we are exploiting their altruism and dedication because they are passionate about teaching and kids and education, and paying them salaries that don't let them buy a house or, live in any sort of peace of mind to take care of their family's basic needs and educational loans and all of the different things that are out there. And, it's been a while since I looked at the statistics, but whether it's frontline teachers, paras, special ed teachers, speech paths, the majority of those are women. They're working on the front lines, and we're not paying them. And it's no wonder that people are choosing to not return to the profession, stay in the profession. And I think there's a huge gender justice issue at play here as well. That's not unique to OPS, but it's perhaps playing out along with the broader political culture problems that makes it really hard to recruit and retain top teachers when teachers are really feeling under attack from a lot of different levels in our community and in our state and in our society. So these are really, really big issues for us to grapple with, but I would hope that this tragic situation would provide perhaps a historic opportunity for you and your colleagues across Nebraska to come to the legislature with a clear plan about what we need to do to address teacher retention, recruitment, shortage crisis in OPS and across the state. There's got to be a price point. You're competing with other employers, right? There's got to be a price point. So whatever that price point is, why don't we know about it so that we can help to fund it? And how is it not already covered with this windfall in valuations, historic funding in state aid, COVID relief money, existing property tax funds, other federal funds, state and local? I mean, where's the gap here? If it's straight up money, how much is it? And why don't you have enough? And I'm really trying to figure it out. Thoughts, questions, ideas?
Yeah, so I would say for staff, for regular teachers as well as special ed, we pay more than anyone else in the state. And we have for a while, and we recognize that we need to pay more. We value our staff. We have extremely dedicated staff and a lot of times overworked staff. So we pay more recognizing the work that they do and the value that they provide to us and our students. And so yes, that's absolutely something that we've looked at. We gave them, Charles, off the top of your head, what's the percent raise that our average teacher is going to get next year, and then within the contract?
Second year of the contract, it's 14-15%. I'd have to go find it. It's a 2% raise plus the $4,500 stipend is being folded into their contract. So no teacher has to experience a loss of money in their paycheck because of the ESSER stipend going away.
Okay, and just one last question then. Tell me how, in addition to this serious situation with lack of special education services and teachers in North Omaha, help me also unpack how the district is handling the provision of speech services for about 1,200 kids district-wide that I'm reading about in the paper last night and this morning. And are speech pathologists treated the same way as like your PTs and your OTs, or are they basically treated on the same scale as like the teachers? Like, how does that work out?
So SLPs are in the OEA agreement.
Okay.
So they receive that 7% as well, just like the special ed teachers do.
Okay. And then what, say, for example, with like an occupational therapist or a physical therapist, what kind of raises are they seeing, or what kind of comp are they seeing?
We contract with Monroe Meyer for our OTs and PTs.
Okay. So just roughly, are they paid about the same as speech pathologists or more or less?
I would have to look to see what that rate is that Monroe Meyer is paying their OTs and PTs.
Okay, and then do you think it's a sustainable solution to put 1,200 kids in front of an iPad and call it good for speech path services? I don't.
It's not, so I'll explain the virtual services. There's a company that we'll be working with that students will log in and there will be a live SLP. And there's also going to be a staff member from the school in the speech room with them, not a speech pathologist, but there will be a staff member. So it's not the same as remote learning or virtual learning where they're at home doing it or they're doing it without staff support. There will be staff support in the room to help them access those services. And then it's live. It's a live person on the screen. They'll either be served however their IEP calls for it, either one-on-one or in a small group. They'll be, if they are in a group, they'll be grouped just like they are if there's in-person SLP according to their need and according to what's outlined on their IEP. There is a lot of information that would suggest that some kids do really well with virtual services, and especially that speech is potentially a service that can be the most successful. So there's some services that we would never want to do virtually if we had any other choice. And speech is an area that was doing teletherapy even before COVID, so it's a little bit more advanced than other virtual services. There's a lot of outside clinicians that for medical speech therapy do teletherapy. So it's a model that we think is going to be successful for students, and for students who don't make progress, we'll be addressing that individually with those families.
Okay, thanks.
Another question, it's about the speech therapist, of the online learning. So I think the article reported that this would start at the end of September. So the students that need the speech therapy, what have they been doing now so far? Or has it been implemented yet? And what will they do until it is implemented?
So the board approved the contract with the company last night, and so we'll begin phasing in. The company has hired SLPs ready, and they are working through Nebraska licensure and certification issues. And as soon as they have everybody licensed and certificated, then we'll be able to start, and those will phase in throughout September. So we've been calculating the missed number of minutes so that when we do have an SLP in place, that we're able to offer additional speech services to make up for those hours, or to provide those over breaks or non-student days during the summer, to make sure that any student that missed any services, those services will be provided.
Okay, it seems like to me this, should have been foreseen. This shortage of speech therapists to teach should have been foreseen a little sooner, so it could have been started earlier in the school year. And I think a similar situation with the 3 schools that didn't provide special ed, to tell the families that special ed wouldn't be provided in the schools just a few days before school started. Couldn't that have been foreseen sooner also, so that the families would have more notice? Because didn't the teachers resign or transfer at the end of the previous school year? So I'm sure you hoped that you would fill those positions before the school year started, but it seems like just a few days before classes started is really short notice.
Yes, and I'll address the first part of your question about the speech therapist. So the first thing that we tried to do was to contract with companies for in-person speech therapy. And we have done that the last few years and had success with that when we have vacancies. Last year, we increased SLP caseloads to a point where it was really high, and we needed to bring those back down this year. And even our contracted agencies that we work with, they also don't have in-person speech therapists. And so that's what put us in a position over the summer that we had to start looking at what are some available options, what are some different avenues that we could take outside of what we had done previously. And then as far as the short notice, like Mr. Wakefield shared, Human Resources was working on filling those positions and looking at every possible solution, because the last thing that we wanted to do was to have to lose students.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Senator Wayne.
I'm just playing with some numbers here. So, do you know the increased cost of now doing door-to-door to the 137 families? And I'm also assuming that if they had a non-IEP student, you allowed that brother or sister family member to transfer with the IEP student.
Correct.
So,
So-
what was the increased cost for buses?
I don't have that.
We'd have to get that for you, Senator.
Was that projected when making this decision?
We considered transportation as a concern and making sure we had the best possible situation to provide transportation.
But we didn't, you guys didn't say this is gonna cost this much.
I don't recall that conversation.
The reason why I'm asking is that cost of increase versus providing contracted services to these schools. Well, if you didn't know the cost, then you didn't have that conversation. I'm not sure how we didn't have that conversation of cost being increased versus was contracted services even thought about?
So we recognize that we would have to provide more routes, but to determine the actual cost of the routes, we'd have to wait till after we had students identified which schools they were selecting.
No, don't give me that. We project bus route cost every year. We knew when I was on the board, we projected that these many kids, a third of our students are busing, and here's how much it costs. Hell, we signed contracts with STA based off of that. Like, we don't just sign a contract and say, we don't know how much it's gonna cost.
These students are being transferred, our students in special ed for these schools are being transported by OPS drivers.
Which I'm glad you just said. So you have to know the cost. Because you know exactly what you're paying your hourly. But that's not the point. My point is, you guys didn't explore contracting services, bringing people into those schools instead of sending kids out like you're doing with speech. Not saying I'm a fan of it, but you didn't explore contracting services, hiring 5 people from private providers to go into those schools?
The information that we have from contracted agencies is they also have a shortage. We're in a situation right now in Nebraska. Some of the information that when I met with NDE over the summer is even across the state, there's a decrease in the amount of approved providers for us to even choose from. So that's not it.
So it wasn't explored
wouldn't
because of a previous conversation that is short everywhere. Because you guys, is OPS providing contracted services to private schools right now?
Yes.
You didn't think about pulling back that and putting them in our own schools, taking care of your students first?
Those providers will not choose not to work in a public school. They will only.
Are those your
accept
employees or are those contracted employees?
They're contracted.
Okay, so there is contracted employees that you guys use. And there wasn't a conversation about using contracted employees to keep those families at those schools.
No, because it wouldn't have been a realistic solution because those staff don't exist.
Well, you don't know because you didn't try. And here's why the second part, Mr. Head, if you're correct on your 20%, you got 140 million in the bank.
That's about right, yeah.
So if you got 140 million in the bank, we couldn't figure out a one-time spend to find contracted people because we didn't have that conversation. We just assumed that it was short. How much COVID dollars have been spent? And how much is left in your expenditures?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I'll get that for you. I know all of it has been budgeted and dedicated. How much has actually been spent versus allocated? I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll get that to you.
I said this at the beginning of the year, but for those who are not listening, I also represent Omaha Public Schools Security Officers Union, and we are in negotiations. does not. We have not talked about special ed. I don't think there's a conflict, but hey, might as well just keep disclosing everything. And I went to Northwest. I don't know if that's a conflict either at this point. How much of your new proposed budget is your general fund versus special building fund? And are those general funds going up or down underneath your proposed budget? Because I really couldn't tell.
So out of it, it's, I'm trying to remember, roughly $1 of the levy is general fund, 4 cents special building fund, roughly where it's at. General fund dollars are going up.
We're going up?
If I remember correctly.
Okay. Oh, it wasn't a gotcha. I was trying to figure it out. All you have is charts. You don't have actual, which charts are handy. Okay, so 140 million in the bank, extra at the 20%, overall decreasing levy. Didn't look at contracted services. Do we have somebody assigned today, or 2 people, 3 people, a group assigned today to look at the secondary issue? Like, are they waking up every day to make sure Omaha North or Northwest, or just thinking of what's close to my district, and I guess New Westview, that they're not going to lose their special ed program because one teacher leaves?
So within human resources, we have a hiring administrator that tracks and communicates with special ed teachers. We also have 2 recruiters that are recruiting and constantly working on those issues, as well as with Ms. Saldiana's TLC's teaching learning consultants for special ed that are working actively with special ed teachers in schools.
I'm concerned with liability. I got nothing else at this point. I don't know what else really to ask.
I got 2 and then I'm done.
The questions are paragraph statements.
I've just got one more quick question. Are you satisfied with the support you've got from the Nebraska Department of Education from addressing the special ed issue?
I am satisfied with the support we've received from the special ed side of Nebraska Department of Education. Amy Rohn has been a collaborator. I talk to her all the time, and she has helped think through some of the solutions. So they're very supportive to the extent that they can be. I think the bigger issue is with certification.
And go ahead. You want to add?
I have concerns with some certification issues that I think would help us across the state to better support teachers and to take us out of situations where we're losing out-of-state teachers, especially in the city of Omaha, with Council Bluffs 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes away, depending on where you live. It's oftentimes easier to get certified for an out-of-state teacher in Iowa than Nebraska. So I do have concerns with house certification. I've shared those with NDE. I do find staff at NDE to be supportive and willing to listen, but I do wish there could be some changes made there that support certification to support all schools across Nebraska.
Okay, and then I'm sure we'll be working on this in the future, but anything the legislature can do to help to address the issue, but I'm sure that's a long answer, so appreciate working with the legislature, anything we can do to help. If there aren't any other questions, Senator Conrad?
Very last. So who ultimately made the call to move the kids in North Omaha? Is it the board or is it the superintendent?
Yeah, it's the superintendent's decision.
Okay, I just wasn't 100% sure how the decision chart worked. And then to Senator Wayne's question and to Senator Merman's kind and standing offer on behalf of each of us here and our colleagues who aren't on this standing committee, how do we get out of it? What is the solution? Is money, certification, culture?
Unfortunately, Senator, I don't think, and I may be stepping on Mr. Head's toes, so I do apologize. I don't think there's an easy answer. I do think some states have begun to implement some programs that are helpful and show lots of hope and promise.
Okay.
Tennessee, Indiana have.
Like the apprenticeship things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those are very intriguing to me and I think show lots of promise. I don't know what the ultimate
Right.
result of those will be.
Right.
I do think it's a complicated question.
Absolutely. Multifaceted. And I think just because it's hard, that doesn't mean that it has to be scary, right? There's nothing more important than educating our kids in the Nebraska family, whether that's in Omaha or Lincoln or Scottsbluff and every place in between. And if indeed this is a statewide problem, which we've well established, we really need to keep our focus on that in 2024 and beyond. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
If not, appreciate you coming in and, our goal is to work together to find solutions to the teacher shortage, especially special ed shortage.
Thank you, Senator. We look forward to continuing this conversation.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that came in that would like to testify? Yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. I must tell you, if I sound a little nervous, it's because I'm really cold. It is like 55 degrees and I've been shivering in the back. Having said that, good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Einan Kokerda. It's spelled ELIZABETH-EYNON-KOKRDA. And I am managing attorney for Education Rights Council, which is a nonprofit that helps families statewide obtain educational equity. ERC exists precisely because special education is complex, it's nuanced, families don't understand it, and they get in trouble when they walk into an IEP where there's 10 staff, just like you had the phalanx of people up here, and they don't know the answers and they're told what the answers are. That's why we exist, to help families obtain educational equity. We have 3 main programs, one of which includes accepting direct representation. We help families across the entire state, and we do accept limited representation when courts ask us to get involved in Douglas County, Sarpy County, and Lancaster County. There's a reason that happens. It happens because when children are in the juvenile system, often it's because they didn't get some of the services they needed to begin with. They were never verified under something called Child Find, which is a legal obligation of districts to go and find children that need services. So you have children that cycle, they come in, they didn't get evaluated. They have a reading disability. The reading disability leads them to become the class clown. The class clown then turns into the kid that skips out. The kid that skips out then may end up in the system either because they were neglected by their family, or they became truant because they're simply not going to school, and so it's the school that referred them to the courts, and or they may be delinquent. In all of those instances, when we accept representation, 90% of the representation has been in Douglas County, and about 90% of that has been OPS students. And the vast majority of OPS students that we represent and help get education services have had inadequate support in the past. So I think it's really clear that we have a problem. And I want to talk to you, of course, directly and specifically about the overall arching issue today of losing people in the 3 school districts. But I think it might be helpful for you to understand the types of issues that ERC sees generally. What are the challenges that we see for school districts? I think the biggest challenge that we see with regard to shortages themselves, not the specific 3, but shortages is, like you heard, it puts enormous pressure on the staff who remain. This in turn creates a cycle where even more staff leave, exacerbating that pressure further. And ultimately, as Senator Wayne mentioned, you can reach a tipping point. And that's dangerous. It's dangerous for children and it's dangerous for teachers. I'm not here today to criticize public schools or defend them. I'm here to share with you what we get every day In the last year, we've consulted with over 300 people. That's not direct representation. That's people that just call up and say, what are the rules? Where do I go? How do I get an answer? Who can I contact? That's 300 people right there. Another 325 we've undertaken representation for across the state. There's a huge need, and that need exists because it's so complicated and because it comes out of a legal framework, so that you have to understand what your rights are in order to obtain services. For example, in this particular situation where somebody calls up a family and says, if you want to stay, you have to waive your special ed or you can go to another building. I'm here to tell you that families called us up and said, what's that mean? Waive. What happens? And we have to tell them that means your child with ADHD, your child with autism, your child with anxiety, depression, PTSD, your child that is in a wheelchair is not going to get services. So I have to leave my home district just to get them? That's what we're hearing. I think it's very traumatic on families and it's traumatic on children because these children are our highest needs children. These are our children who are most vulnerable already. These are children who have anxiety and depression and trauma. These are children that can't just hop on a bus. Most of these children aren't riding a bus. When you are a child that is going to move onto a bus, if you are, for example, on the spectrum, that's an enormous change for you. And you heard the bus driver who testified, who said, we have to have extra support for these children so that they don't have issues just because it's so new to them, so difficult for them, and they don't know any of the new staff. They don't have friends. It's a big deal. So what do we see generally? We see not enough staff to actually do the comprehensive evaluations required by law. We're seeing incomplete screenings. We're seeing incomplete evaluations where they're not doing the entirety of the evaluation because they don't have the people to do it. I want to insert, I'm an enormous supporter, as is ERC, of public schools generally. Very specifically because that's the place where our children that we worry about, our most vulnerable children, have the greatest opportunity to get supports. We want public schools. I want OPS to succeed. But I think in order to have that success, we have to be very clear-eyed about what's happening. Many of you have asked questions about, have you looked forward? Have you made this effort? What are we going to do next year? Because what we're experiencing this year for these children is worse than the year before. So it's worse this year than it was right after COVID, when everybody had a problem. We see families that are being recommended to skip 3-year evaluations that otherwise are required. This can result in children being served on the basis of very dated information. And this is not just these 3 schools, this is in general. Families don't understand the implication of missing or skipping evaluation. Families don't understand how to navigate to get extra supports. We also hear a lot from teachers, and this breaks my heart because we have teachers that call us. Sometimes they tell us who they are, sometimes it's anonymous. They're being asked to modify IEPs, to remove individual and out-of-class supports, to move children off of IEPs where they get actual instruction and onto 504 plans where all they receive are accommodations. An IEP is when a whole team comes together and it creates a very individualized education program for that student. That IEP is essentially a contract. It's a contract where the school says, this is what we're going to provide. And it's mandated by both federal and state law. While I have great sympathy when we have shortages, I also have to say, but we are getting money for this. And these children merit this. These children need it. So we can't just stop and say, well, we're short, so you don't get what you need. You're short, so we're gonna move you. I'm very worried that we have families that don't understand the ramifications. If somebody calls up and says, hey, great news. We're not gonna have your child go down the hall anymore for resource. Your child can have it right in the classroom. And we don't, that sounds good, right? But where's that gonna happen? Is it happening in a co-taught class? A co-taught class is where you have one teacher and one special education teacher and they're teaching a classroom. It sounds okay, except that what that means is larger classroom. A larger classroom, more segregated on the basis of disability, more children with higher needs being put together. It creates sometimes the exact opposite of what we're seeking. Why are we going to co-taught classes instead of the resource room where we had somebody go down and be in a smaller class size? Because we don't have the teachers. So we need to think about the potential of the greater harm that's happening here with this shortage, because it's happening across the entirety of the district and maybe other districts as well. But it's also harming each of these kids because they may not be getting the services that they actually merit. When teachers are being asked to do things, I think it's important to understand, like I said, it's a contract. So a teacher doesn't have an authority to do this individually, nor can any teacher or IEP team actually predetermine this decision. I have grave concerns about predetermination if we're changing services, because that has to be a joint decision made by parents and family. And when you put somebody in a crisis where they just have to decide, that really denies meaningful participation where the family understands fully what their choices are. Many classrooms that were formerly dedicated to children of greatest need in the Omaha Public Schools, children with multiple disabilities or serious intellectual disabilities, have been eliminated. In OPS, there are substantially fewer alternative curriculum program classrooms throughout the district. Within building settings where children formerly went to small groups, instruction is also being eliminated. Busing shortages obviously exacerbate the problem. I want to talk about two key points. One, when we talk about making up for lost services, like we just heard, if we miss speech, we'll make it up. An hour for hour doesn't actually put a child back in the position they would have been had they received that service timely. They get it. Now they're in the position they would have been a month ago. So they're still behind. So just doing hour for hour doesn't actually compensate in terms of putting children back in the position that they would be in. Moving to remote speech services. Challenges for speech language in telepractice include, there's engagement distractions. I know there's going to be a staff member there, but there's problems with children trying to manipulate the device. There's problems with the platforms. Telepractice is often less interactive. Digital contact requires a capacity of children to engage in it. It has to be clear. I'm on a lot of Microsoft Teams meetings, which is what the Omaha Public Schools uses. More often than not, the majority of people turn their picture off. That's because it functions better. We can hear each other more clearly. It doesn't bog down. So I'm worried about the system. I see my light is off. May I continue?
Yep, I ask you to wrap it up pretty quickly.
Okay,
Go ahead.
thank you. I would say that pitch varies significantly on all virtual platforms. Children who are hearing impaired also need speech language services. I'm not sure how OPS is going to determine who gets speech services remotely as opposed to in person, and whether children getting remote services are predominantly minority or poor students. This carries right into this idea of what happened here in the three schools. One of the things I think that's critical to understand is Walnut Hill is nearly 40% of the parents are refugees or immigrants. They don't speak English. They don't understand the system at all. So they're at a double disadvantage when that's the school that loses its special ed teacher. What can you guys do? How can you approach this? One of the things I think we need to think about is, from a legislature, do you want to ask questions about whether we should actually have student-teacher ratios for individuals with disabilities? Do you guys think it would be appropriate to maybe regulate co-taught classes and how that works? Co-teaching is a skill in and of itself. With bus routes, can you revisit the transportation statutes? Take a look and see whether we want to actually make sure that we have transportation that is required, so that we don't have, the other day we had somebody that said, I drove, I didn't get transportation. I drove my route, it's 2.1 miles. And the answer for the school district was yes, but if your daughter crosses through the park on her own walking, then it's only 1.9 miles. So we're not going to give your child transportation. So looking at transportation and seeing if there's something there. And finally, and then I promise, Senator Merman, I will stop. Accountability. We heard a lot about how are you being accountable to these funds. There are no statutes right now that actually permit maybe intermittent penalties or making sure that a certain amount of money are actually earmarked if there's a problem, actually dedicating some of your special education funds to resolving those problems. The legislature has regulated those types of things in the past. It may be appropriate to revisit that as well. And of course, it's very hard to understand why no teachers were removed from other buildings where the majority of students are not children of color or not in poverty. With that, I close my remarks.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Chair Merman, and thank you, Elizabeth. Always good to see you and get your insights and information. I know that you're compressed for time, but you did lay out in your written testimony a host of different ideas and solutions and remedies that the committee and other stakeholders at OPS and across the state, I think, maybe can dig into subsequent to this hearing date as we prepare for the 2024 session, or even explore perhaps exigent or emergency solutions or remedies for the short term as well. But the one thing that I did want to give you an opportunity to maybe respond to or help the committee understand a little bit better was, I don't know if it was meant to be disparaging from our friends at OPS, but they noted perhaps just the concern overall when it comes to length of time and capacity for conducting IEP meetings, and how there's been, an increase in families being represented by counsel and otherwise. I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, considering how much is on the line for a family and their kid and their kid's future. But do you want to just talk about, what you've seen in your practice or in your experience about why it's important for families to have legal counsel during the IEP process or disciplinary process or otherwise, and kind of, how that maybe interplays with their capacity or considerations on budget or otherwise?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Good question, but let me try.
I think it was directed to your agency though, so I wanted to make sure to give you an opportunity to respond there.
I think that one of the hardest things for a family to do, because they're not special education experts, they don't have that background. They don't understand necessarily how a contract is written. And as I said, an IEP is a contract. So if it's not worded carefully, you have family after family that say, I thought I was getting this, but it didn't happen. So having somebody there to explain what it means and what it doesn't mean is important. In the juvenile context, which is, I think, what the main point was, what the courts have discovered is that children are being referred for truancy by the school district. And when they look at the school records, they realize that that truancy is coming because the child didn't get services. So we had a child that was not attending school. The child's mother spoke Spanish. Nobody had ever evaluated that child. That child was on the autism spectrum. The child asked specifically, may I sit in a small room? I can come into the building if you let me do that. Wasn't granted, no IEP. It's those types of situations. So what has happened in the courts is their job is to rehabilitate the child. And one of the very first things they put in every single court order is, child, you need to go to school, you need to go to school every day, you need to attend and be successful. Well, if I've got an education barrier in front of me that is a disability and it's not being met, I can't do that. The court wants children to be successfully rehabilitated, to more quickly get out of the system. And what they have learned is that when parents have assistance, when parents are told, here's how you can get this support, and are helped to get that support, the child does exit more quickly. So that's the entire reason for these appointments, is to help rehabilitate, whether it's truancy, neglect, or delinquency, by making sure that that child has those tools. Some children, you can give them those tools and they don't use them. But the vast majority of students that we work with, when they get those tools, they start succeeding.
Right. That's very helpful. And I appreciate the link to truancy issues and the need for reform there as well. But the last question I would have, and just kind of understanding the dynamic, I know there's people on the committee with lived experiences as teachers or with kids with special needs, and maybe they've worked through this process in a different way than my familiarity extends, but the school district is well represented. when they come into an IEP meeting, right? There's highly trained educational professionals, perhaps a team of lawyers that is there, or at least an attorney that might be there to help negotiate things, or no? I mean, it seems to me that most everyday families who are in this situation are in a disparate knowledge and bargaining position, and that requires perhaps the assistance or advice of counsel. Maybe that's not fair. Can you tell me how that process looks?
Well, every school district has their own ability to decide whether they want to have a lawyer attend or not.
Okay.
As I said, we work across the state. More often than not, when we're advocating on behalf of a family, legal counsel for the district isn't present.
Okay.
However, in the Omaha Public Schools, they've determined that they want legal counsel present every time that there happens to be legal counsel with the family. Those are decisions that the district makes, and they're varied across the state.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Just a quick question, maybe the previous testifiers could have answered it better, but if a family decides not to take special ed rather than move, is that effective according to the contract or for a certain amount of time, or for 1 year, or going forward, or how does that work?
It works until they decide that they would like to see if they could be verified again. So in other words, if I withdraw for services and then it's not working and I say, oh, I really need those, I can go back to the school district, but then it takes an entire process. What happens is there has to be a new evaluation. The evaluation has to be done within 60 calendar days or 45 school days, whichever is less. After that, it's another 30 days to get the IEP. So in other words, if I effectively give up services, I'm going to generally lose between, I don't know, even if I change my mind the next day, a semester, 90 days of school. The other thing that happens is I lose those protections. So a child with a disability may have a behavior that we don't necessarily think is great, but they need improvement. So in other words, I'm really anxious. What I do when I get upset is I just get up and I walk out. Well, that's dangerous. I can't just be leaving the room, especially if I'm a little kid. But I need instruction to be taught. You know, John, you can go down to Mrs. Smith's room. That's a safe place for you. So if you get anxious, just put down this pass and go down the hall. Now we know where you are. You still get to get calmed down and you can come back. If I do that with an IEP, I'm fine. If I do that without an IEP, I will get disciplined because it violated a school rule. So there are protections, especially for our younger children, because as you know, this legislature has very carefully looked at making sure that we're not punishing, especially our littlest kids, for potential disabilities. You enacted Senator McKinney's bill. I will say that we do need to look at accountability for that because I'm still getting reports of districts that are suspending because there isn't an immediate accountability for failing to abide by the law. So that's something I hope we look at this fall.
Okay.
But that's it.
Okay.
Short
Thank
answer.
you. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for testifying.
Thank you very much.
Any other testifiers?
Hello, my name is Edison McDonald, EDISON MCDONALD, representing the ARC of Nebraska. I'll keep my comments brief, although I didn't plan on testifying today because I've only talked to a handful of families directly impacted. I want to make sure and just draw our attention back out. This isn't just about OPS. This is about schools all across the state. And while they may be dealing with the concentration within a couple of schools, this is the sort of stories and the sort of impacts that I've been coming and talking to y'all about. And I'm so thankful over the last year that you guys have really invested a lot in special education. But what we're seeing is that this has been happening kid by kid in school districts all across the state. And it really is a critical long-term lack of infrastructure and funding for special education that we need to really invest in over the long term. I also just wanted to add in my comments and support Ms. Kokita's comments regarding the need for increase in special education advocacy. We're really seeing that. I'm not an attorney, but we frequently end up referring to attorneys, including Ms. Kokoda's agency, because it is so important to make sure that those rights are protected. And unfortunately, we're seeing the flip side. We're seeing that school districts more frequently are lawyering up earlier in the process and trying to direct things more towards legal action, which has been concerning. So normally we have advocates across the state that work with families to really go and help to support families and really try and work with those school districts and work in a way that is more collaborative. But we've been forced more and more to really refer towards attorneys because that's where the need is gone. So I want to make sure that we just keep that in mind as you move forward. And I hope that you really will start to think, not just in the short term, but think about in the long term, how do we deal with more of the special education issue? Because this is not just going to be short term, this is going to be long term. And unfortunately, even though we took a giant step in the right direction last year, we're going to need more funding. We're going to need more support, and we're going to need more action from y'all. So I look forward to continuing to partner with you and helping to address some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Any questions? If not, thank you very much. Any other testifiers? No other testifiers today? Okay, well then,
Could I just note one thing for the
Sure.
record? Nobody from the Nebraska Department of Education is going to testify. Is that right? Okay. Well, just wanted to, and this might not be the most recent, but according to the 2020-2021 Legislator's Guide to State Agencies, the Nebraska State Department of Education has, at last count, according to this document, 547 people on staff and a budget of $1.7 billion. I understand and appreciate that there was a State Board of Education meeting in Aurora today that may have prohibited some engagement. But I do find it disappointing that we have not received any emails back from the State Department of Education in regards to this issue, and that there is no representative from the state agency here today.
okay, thank you. Any other testifiers?
Thank you, Cindy.
Good afternoon, Senator Merman, members of the Education Committee. My name is Jack Moles, SJACKMOLES. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Rural Community Schools Association. And I was discussing with a staff member from OPS about the hearing today, and just to see what the hearing was about. And I was asked if possibly I could provide an angle from the rural schools on what staffing looks like this year for special education. And so what I did is I contacted our member superintendents and asked for their input. And I looked at three different areas. What I looked at were what you might call your regular or non-specialized special education teachers, special education paraprofessionals, and then specialized SPED positions such as speech pathologists, psychologists, behavioral specialists. And so I thought I'd share with you a little bit of what I got back. I had 90 districts respond to me in just a couple of days. So this is a big issue for them. I found out that of those 90 districts, they had a normal staffing needs of 411.75 non-specialized teachers, an average of about 4.75 per district. Of the needed 411.75, 29.25 of these positions have not been filled this year, or at least by a properly endorsed teacher, or some of them have been even just left open. To meet this, 15 districts reassigned regular school classroom teacher to the special ed position. In most of the other instances, the existing special education staff just took on more of a load, and they already have a heavy load. 56 of the superintendents reported that they had advertised for 71 special education teacher positions this year. Out of all those positions, they collectively received 77 applications. 71 positions, they received collectively 77 applications. That is an average of 1.38 per position. Of the 56 districts seeking applications, 15 reported that they did not receive even one qualified applicant. And 3 more reported that they received just one applicant, and that applicant had just been fired by their previous district, so they didn't want to go down that road. One district told me that they received 8 applications. Another said 4. The rest were all 1, 2, or 3, or as I said, the 0. And then if you look at special education paraprofessionals, of the 90 responding districts, almost half of them reported that they were not fully staffed in the area of special education paras this year. They reported being 93.65 paras short of the district's needs, an average of a little over 2 in a district. Several of the superintendents reported they had to significantly increase wages and benefits for sped paras in order to compete with local private businesses. And some of the businesses they talked about were fast food businesses, the Walmarts, those types of things. Another issue that was brought up by several was just the ability to find substitutions for their special education paras. And then in regard to specialized special education positions, 13 of the superintendents reported that they had not been able to fill the needs of their districts in 18.4 positions. And the most common of those were speech language and school psychologists. In specialized special education positions, most districts are able to fully staff. But the ability to do this does not rest with the school district, rests with the educational service units that our rural school districts vitally depend on. And almost to a person, my superintendents made reference to their district's dependency on ESU filling those needs. A few of the ESU administrators responded to my request for information. They also reported severe difficulties in hiring qualified specialized special education personnel. Simply stated, without the ESUs that serve our rural schools, we would have a bigger crisis on our hands, as most rural districts would not be able to provide the services they need for their students. Also, the groups that also help with this are local hospitals have been able to help, especially with PT and OT. I put some other observations for you that I got from my study or my survey. I'll highlight a few of those. One is moving a classroom teacher into a SPED position. You know, you talked about a ripple effect earlier. There's a ripple effect that it causes larger class sizes in the regular classroom. School districts have begun a Grow Your Own program in which they help paras to go through the program or go through programs that are offered at Chadron State and Wayne State to become certified special education teachers. This is really helping, but that doesn't help the current year. These programs are kind of just starting for them. Many also commented that the caseloads in their districts are growing and that the district may be put in the position of needing to add more special education staff, and they're really concerned about finding those people. A few districts were able to bring in a student teacher in special education for this year, for the semester. And then with the idea that they have promised them a full-time position as soon as they're fully certificated. A few of those districts are paying their student teachers this year just to get them in the door and to get that process started. I know some districts, Omaha actually is one of those that is paying, I think, student teachers right now. Several superintendents comment that they know they have either sped teachers or paras that are planning to retire at the end of this school year, and they just don't know how they're going to replace those. One in particular, they have 2 special ed teachers that have been there forever. They both have said they're retiring this year, and they just don't know how, and their location is going to make it very hard for them to fill those 2 positions. So, kind of stop right there. My red light's on, but I'll just kind of finish up if you'd let me.
Sure.
You know, the senators and Governor Pillen have done things to help with this. Increased sped reimbursement, measures to assist in addressing teacher shortages, especially point out Senator Linehan and Senator Walls from this committee have been, very diligent about working toward helping to solve the crisis. And that's what we have as a crisis situation right now. In closing, staffing for special education services is a growing issue that affects all sizes and locations of school districts in the state of Nebraska, and we really need to do some things to work on this. So I'll stop right there.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Moles? Yes.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate all your good information and kind of helping to paint the picture beyond OPS and how different districts are grappling with these issues. Do you happen to know roughly how many schools have moved to 4-day weeks because of some of these issues? I think last count, maybe I saw 4 or 6 districts, something like that.
Yeah, there were several that were having the conversation. They haven't made the move yet. I think there are 3 or 4 that made the move last year.
Right.
But I don't have an exact number for you, but more and more are looking at that. And speaking of 4-day week, I did have a couple superintendents said they were able to hire a special education teacher on a 4-day contract.
Okay.
The teacher said, if I've got to go 5 days, I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
And they only had the 1 applicant. So they said, yeah, we'll go 4 days.
Right. Okay. Well, and I know other states have moved in that direction, and some districts are here in Nebraska to deal with staffing and a host of other issues. I think that would be a nightmare from a workforce perspective as a working parent to not have more days in schools, but I understand perhaps there's some benefits to that schedule for both their families and the teachers. And I just want to have better understanding that if that's something a lot of districts are moving to, like that's a pretty big shift in terms of how we provide education in Nebraska. And,
Yeah, we had actually, at one time when I was a superintendent, we actually considered the 4-day week. We went and visited some schools around the 4-day week, and there were some benefits to it. The way you set your schedule up, you don't have kids missing for dentist appointments, things like that. You expect to do it on the off day.
That's true.
So you actually have in a given day more time with all kids. Childcare was something that I thought of was probably an issue. That actually there was some ability to hire high school kids to do daycare during the day. Some things like that. The amazing thing to me, the group that, because we like I said, we toured, we took parents, we took kids, staff, and the group that was most against it were our kids, because they thought they would have more homework on the days that they had. And so that was one of the reasons why we didn't go.
I thought it would be parents, so that's very interesting. And then I've seen studies with mixed results about academic performance with less classroom time and instruction. So that's, of course, something that would need to be figured in as well. My last question is just, if one of the big ways to solve these issues for special ed services and teacher recruitment and retention and paras and transportation kind of writ large is about money, how is that going to square up with this 3% cap that we've got now on local districts and meeting all of these needs?
Yeah, it really would be an issue. The math just would be an issue.
Yeah.
But I think money's a part of it.
Okay.
But when I look down here, and what did I say? 15 districts didn't receive 1 applicant. If they offered 15,000 more to no applicants,
Right.
you still don't have somebody taking that
But if
position.
you're competing with Burger King or Walmart and they're paying whatever they're paying in that community plus benefits, at some point there is a price point, right?
Yeah, well, I said that was for parents.
Okay.
Yeah, but for
Right, not
teachers,
right.
you look at it, the students the student teachers that are coming out of our preparation, colleges and universities, their numbers are going way down.
Yeah.
The number of kids coming out. So we've got to find a way, and it's not all money. We got to find a way to make this more of a thing that kids choose to say, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want to do. I did it. I went into it because I loved history and I wanted to teach history, and I also wanted to help kids. Well, that's great, but I think they need to feel more valued. I think we're at a low point right now of
Morale.
teachers and well, administrators, everybody, but schools feeling valued. Like we, the good old days when we were all growing up, schools felt more valued and teachers did. And I think we need to turn that tide and get back to that. That's one of the big things.
No, I agree. Thank you.
And I don't think there's any legislation you can pass. to make that
Well,
happen.
but just that. But it does matter how we use our platforms to elevate different issues. And the more that we use our platforms and our public discourse to tear down teachers and education, it does play into that.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and that by itself is not the whole issue either. As I said, money would sure help.
Money and culture, perhaps.
And roadblocks, there are roadblocks.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Senator Sanders.
Yes, thank you, Senator Berman. This is not a question, but I want to thank you for being here today, and everyone in the room that attended today. This wasn't a trial, not trying to put anybody on the spot. We certainly hope to continue to work with each and every one of you. And I believe you were there in the room when Governor Pillen, right after election, called a meeting and tried to be proactive on the education front, right? And even though we tried that, we still didn't predict everything. And I don't know if you agree, but I think it is a perfect storm. We've been hearing about the baby boomers are coming. For 25 years, we've been talking about it in the business world. What are we doing about it? And I think a lot of companies have tried to position, but then we had COVID and that accelerated baby boomers leaving the workforce. So what are the other solutions to this? And that's where we have to continue to work together to find that solution and be creative. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And also last year, but all of us need to continue to work together and pick up the phone and call.
Totally agree, Senator.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much for
Thank you.
testifying.
Thanks for waiting for me.
Any other testifiers? Okay, well, no other testifiers. That'll wrap up the hearing for today. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Well, I was gonna ask a couple questions, but everybody got ready. I was like,
Okay, thanks for the candy.
Yes.
I'll run back to
We gotta
Randy.
get the years for the committee so that we know who's
hammer down. I turned.
Who's carrying the stick?
Yes, it is, ma'am.
You guys.
What's the?
Is Steve's legal counsel in the office today?
He is dealing with the groin